Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast and published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is the High Street opposite the Guildhall, and members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. Thank you. Can I first welcome our guests here this evening? We have the Police Crime Commissioner, John Campion, and Claire Richardson, is it, I believe? Thank you, welcome for coming. And we also have the team from Sanctuary Housing, Sophie Bell, Yvonne Grenane, Stephen Ward, and Rebecca Craig, who will introduce themselves later. We'll go to agenda item 1, which is appointments of substitutes. Julian?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've just the one substitute with us tonight, Stephen Hodgson, who's here for Alan Amos.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of any interest. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. My employer is Sanctuary Housing, so I thought better declare that one.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? None recorded. Are you able to participate in the debate? Yeah, fine. Thank you. And we'll go to agenda item 3, public participation. None. And we'll go agenda item 4, minutes of the last meeting. We can go through page by page, please. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Thank you. Those are an accurate and true record, Julian. Okay, agenda item number 5, presentation from the PCC, John Campion. Do we have an introduction to this?
No, Chair. Just happy to hand straight over to
John.
Mr. Campion.
Your floor's yours.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me. The budget feels like a long time ago, Chairman, but happily to attend today to talk about some of the issues that were raised by the Council when considering my precept. Having taken some advice, I advised by Mr. Pugh speak for 5-ish minutes and then give the opportunity for the committee to have any questions that they might have. As you would imagine, as Commissioner, one of my central duties is to ensure that I have enough resources not only to fund an efficient and effective police force, also to provide resources to support victims of crime and to invest in the prevention of crime. This year's budget is set as the Council's budget was set in slightly unusual circumstances in that the cost of inflation was slightly higher, or indeed significantly higher in some cases than we had been predicting. Of course, we had been predicting it to go up, but it went up faster than we were expecting, including in an acute sense the amount that we have to pay for energy. West Mercia Police is no different in terms of a normal public sector organisation, or indeed most households, and are subject to those same changes in the cost of running premises and indeed other inflationary impacts. So we have seen significant impact from inflation during this last year and predicted to run through this next financial year. We've also seen a change in demand for policing post-COVID. We've seen significant increases not only in the demand presented, but also in the complex nature of that demand. So, of course, my job is to ensure that I can commission a system to deal with that additional demand. That demand isn't just a case of more transactions, it is also the changing complexity of that demand, including ever greater use of cyber-enabled crime that is more and more long-winded and indeed complex to investigate. So it's about ensuring that I continue to support West Mercia Police to be able to adapt and indeed respond to those challenges. And very lastly, we are seeing significant delays in the criminal justice system, so ensuring that I continue to invest ever greater amounts of money in supporting those witnesses and victims of crime to ensure that they are supported through that criminal justice process remains indeed a priority. I was just going to touch on, and I think the central premise of the debate and indeed your letter, just some of the benefits, the so what's to the public in relation to this budget. I was elected in 16 and West Mercia spent roughly £200 million and relied on its reserves significantly year in, year out, with a falling number of police officers, just under 2,000. Today we have over just about 2,500 police officers and spend just over £270 million, and we no longer rely on our reserves to balance the budget. So that's 500 additional police officers, to which this next year we'll see that number rise above the highest establishment that the force has ever had. And those additional officers not only will be in different parts of the organisation, building on the investment that I made last year in the investigatory function, but also on public-facing roles. So there will be additional resources, some additional 20 officers across those safer neighbourhood teams, plus some augmented roles for not only police community support officers, but also the support that they get in terms of engaging with the public, so the machinery that helps them be visible and accessible in their community. It will also see the creation of crime-fighting teams in every local policing area across West Mercia, 55 police officers that will help ensure that we have got visible and active police action in all communities as crime, as it does traditionally, ebbs and flows, to ensure that there is the capacity for that tactical response in that timely manner. The other benefit I would draw out was the investment in helping ensure that less people are vulnerable in our society, both in children and in adults. Unfortunately, the exploitation of children is everywhere in our community, and including in Worcestershire and indeed in Worcester City. And so continued investment in the online child sexual exploitation team, and indeed the investment in the Protecting Vulnerable People team, which again both are targeted with investigating those that are causing that harm and ultimately help identifying victims so that they can get the right support. The other element is in relation to how we support young people. So I want to ensure that not only young people are supported to have a safe childhood, also that they are active citizens as they grow into being adults. And I think an important part of that is having their voice heard, so supporting West Mercia Police to establish a youth commission to ensure across West Mercia that voice is loud and very present. On top of, because I'm conscious of Mr. Pugh's guidance of 5 minutes, on top of that, it will see significant capital investment in relation to a number of significant projects that we haven't seen in recent years. Some things that we won't see, so technology, I will have invested over a 4-year period some £40 million in information technology systems, but also important infrastructure investment, such as a new firearms training range for the force, which will enable the most complex and serious and most and indeed the most impactful of police tactics to be trained to continue to the high standard that we would expect. A new joint police and fire station in Redditch, For those of you that have been to Redditch, you will know that one of the poorest in conditions buildings that we've got in the West Mercia estate, and right that we have got another innovative project with the fire service to ensure that we have a fit-for-purpose police and fire station in that part of Worcestershire to ensure that policing can be retained in the heart of that community for time to come. This is on top of additional investment in such things as the Sexual Assault Referral Centre, i.e. the health-based facility as to where the forensic recovery and then support of the victim can take place to ensure that they get the justice that they deserved. At the end, I would say, Chairman, and I'm sure it will come out in the questions, I am, I think, by ideology, an individual who believes in taxing the right amount, as in it's not see what you can tax the most and then spend it on. It's about what we need, what is reasonable and what is affordable. As Commissioner over my tenure, I am the third lowest increaser of police precept across England and Wales. Until last year, I was the lowest. I've crept up 2 places. There's a very small margin between the two, but I am now third. And indeed, the additional £9.84 per year, which is £19 a week, that I asked the average council taxpayer, I considered very carefully in relation to affordability, and I think which is an increase of roughly 3.94%, that is affordable at the time when we are seeing significantly inflationary pressures that do have to be absorbed, and indeed we'll see West Mercia Police make difficult decisions during this next 12 months, and indeed put ever greater focus on delivering the transformational projects that I have in train that will ensure that we continue to provide efficient and effective policing, not only to the citizens of Worcester City, but across West Mercia.
Thank you, John. I don't know where that guidance of 5 minutes came from, but I thought it was more like 15 minutes. So by all means, if you want to carry on, carry on. Fine, not a problem. No, well, thank you for first of all, obviously attending today, and then explaining your priorities and where the decisions that you've. So the reasoning behind the decisions that you've made in terms of the choices around the precept. I'll open it up to the floor this evening and take questions from members before summing up. And we'll allow approximately 15 to 20 minutes for questioning. I've got Councillor Lamb, Pietrowski and Isera. Councillor Lamb.
Really. The first one, I was glad to hear the phrase policing at the heart of the community. And to start with a very, what might be seen as very parochial question. I represent St John's. We work very closely with the police team there. Paul Slaymaker in particular is a very supportive officer. First question is the police post in St John's safe? Because this council passed a motion a few months ago because there was a rumour that the police post in Dines Green was in danger of being sort of got rid of, and I think we wrote a letter to you to seek assurance that that was not going to be removed. So it'd be interesting to hear your view on that. Second question is, I work in Sandwell, and the thing about crime is no sort of, it doesn't follow boundaries or borders. So it'd be interesting to know how you work with your colleagues in the West Midlands, for example, your counterpart as Police and Crime Commissioner in the West Midlands. Because if you take an issue, I work in education in Sandwell, county lines is a big issue, and you get people from Birmingham, from Sandwell, from that kind of area, and they come down railway lines into Worcester, and are involved in county lines selling drugs, for example. So it'd be interesting to know how you work across boundaries. You're obviously a Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner. Your counterpart in West Midlands is obviously Labour. So how does that work? And also, with my hat on as the young children and young people's champion, it was really great to hear the emphasis on young people. And I had a meeting yesterday with some representatives from Freedom Leisure, because there's been some sort of antisocial behaviour in the centre of Worcester over the last sort of few months, which I know people like Warwick and his team have been working extremely hard to do something about. And interesting, talking to Freedom Leisure yesterday, they were saying what would be useful from the Police and Crime Commissioner would be, rather than dealing with the problem, to try and deal with prevention. And they were talking about seeking some money from the Police and Crime Commissioner to invest in divergent activities, activities where young people are identified, perhaps police and crime, perhaps PCSOs are given training to help them deal with young people and offer them activities which help get rid of some of that energy that at the moment is being sort of focused in perhaps less sort of wholesome activities in the centre of Worcester. So those sort of three questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll have a go at just running a few through those, Councillor Lamb. The first, in relation to the police base, and indeed you're correct, I have given reassurance around it. Whilst I don't own a Guildhall, which has its historic place in the faithful city, I can assure you the police base in your part of Worcester City doesn't have quite the same aesthetic, or indeed the same part in history. It is a building of an age, and so if it is no longer economic to use that facility, then my commitment is that we won't, because every penny I spend on inefficient buildings is less than I have to spend on actual policing. But the commitment I have given is that that will be replaced with a facility within that community. The reference that you're making is to an estate strategy that hasn't really existed in modern time in West Mercia, but it's how I plan to use the many sites that I have across West Mercia in an efficient and effective way, making sure we're investing in the right places and indeed rationalising where appropriate. But having police bases within their communities right at the centre of that strategy. And to be clear, there's no proposal to move it elsewhere at the moment, but it's highlighting at some point it is likely to be not fit for the purpose that we currently require it, i.e. it's costing too much to provide it. I absolutely concur with your point around cross-border crime. We're right on the edge of the West Midlands here in Worcestershire, and indeed ever more so in the north part of the county. We are impacted by crime coming across the border. Crime levels are significantly higher in the West Midlands than they are in West Mercia. They get significantly more money from the government to tackle it, but crime is nonetheless still higher. And indeed, I don't think we see the effective intervention in society to support those that might otherwise lead that lawful life, not given the right support and chance in life. So therefore I think there is a perpetual cycle in too many parts of the West Midlands that is affecting disproportionately our communities in Worcestershire. So at an operational basis, I'm reassured the Chief Constable has an excellent relationship with West Midlands Police and indeed the other two forces in the West Midlands. And from a strategic sense, we work together. We share something called a regional organised crime unit. So we work together to ensure those causing the most serious of harm are tackled and indeed brought to justice appropriately. We also collaborate in relation to some police training, currently in relation to initial officer training, public order and taser training, and we also collaborate in and around how counter-terrorism policing is delivered. That's slightly different because it's linked to a national collaboration, but again, it is between the four forces. I would describe it as good and effective collaboration. Could it be better and more effective? Yes, I believe it could be, but at the moment, it is in a good place. And lastly, in relation to diversionary activities, absolutely, I am a big fan in seeing that work delivered, and indeed I was in Pershore last night seeing some of the work funded by the county being delivered. And the reason why I mentioned Pershore in that youth work to hear how my complementary work that I fund through it's called Climb, which is about those on the edge of potential exploitation or criminality, get the right support. So I see my role in diversionary is to ensure I'm investing in those other services around that traditional youth work to make sure that there are those pathways that youth work can refer into. What I would also say is that I recognise that sometimes it isn't about structured programmes, so I also provide a Commissioners' Community Fund that all the local superintendents have got access to. It's small pots of money for activity, so it can be something as small as being able to hire a room for a certain activity, through to needing a minibus, or all the way through to bits of equipment and others. But that community-based activity to which the police need to sometimes be able to go to the table and say, we've got a little bit of funding to help build that coalition to get it done.
Thank you. Councillor Przarski.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you also for, together with Lloyd, writing a very persuasive letter following my question at the full council a few months ago now, hoping to invite our Commissioner to this meeting today. John, thank you very much and good to see you here. First of all, I think, could I please ask you to convey our appreciation and gratitude to all the police officers doing extremely important work to keep our community safe, including PC Greg, who's probably embarrassed by bringing up her name. But it's not every day you witness a PC retrieving a stolen moped from a bush when you go for a dog walk. So excellent officers, really hard work. I want to ask you a question, John, because I think back in the past we had a debate whether the police numbers matter or not, and I hope this is not going to be a sort of a diversion tactic. I'm looking at the Freedom of Information Act request I made to your office in August 2022, so last year. The headcount, you said that you were in charge since 2016. The headcount in 2016 was 2,087, and then it went up and then it went down. It went down again in 18 and 19. So in terms of the savings, I think it looks like to me there was lots and lots of police officers, presumably experienced police officers, who have lost their jobs. So just to get this right, the police numbers went down significantly under your watch. Now, my question is this. I have a question and invitation. The question is, on my patch, we are still waiting for one more PC to complete the local S&T team. When the residents are going to get their money's worth, please? And then in terms of the invitation, I would like to put it on record. It would be most welcome in Batten Hall, St. Peter's, to join us at one of the PAC meetings or indeed community meetings. I would love to welcome you and introduce you to the residents there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been to Batten Hall a number of times, usually popping leaflets through the letterbox, trying to get one of my colleagues elected, perhaps not so successfully recently as we have been in the past. I would suggest your dialogue around police numbers is based on your hope of the truth rather than the reality. So my position incredibly clear that the numbers, and indeed I've got them on the wall in my office of when I got elected, of that 2,000 figure, and indeed the budget that I published and is online shows that figure just hovering around now 2,500. So that is a clear trajectory of 500 more. So it is very difficult, I would suggest, even for you to suggest that they've gone down significantly in my time, because 2,000 to 2,500 is more. Now, as to whether or not you enter into the argument that we've had more in the past and they were replacing them or not, that would be a matter for you. But one thing that definitely isn't true is there isn't less now than when I got elected. There are more, and I have overseen that increase during my time. But I would also caveat that that how many there are in total should be irrelevant, because it should feel that there are enough. There are enough to respond to emergencies, there are enough to deal with investigations, there are enough to be visible and accessible in our communities. And the clear view that I have taken is that we wanted to see more police officers available to do those activities. And that's why in my time, we've not only seen the 300 odd that we've seen come from the national 20,000 uplift, we've also seen approximately 200 delivered via local resources, because I recognise that ensuring the Chief Constable has the right number of police officers is an important part of what the police do, because you are absolutely correct. There is quite extraordinary policing activity day in, day out, 24/7 around the clock around West Mercia that is often far more challenging than sometimes that we see as a community. And indeed, it is everyday heroism and everyday heroes. And I want to make sure that they have the right numbers. But we also need to make sure is that they are focused on the activities that we need them to be focused upon, including our community priorities. It does take a while to ensure that new officers are trained, as in they are not unboxed and then instantly equipped with the experience an experienced officer would have. But just to correct one of your very early assertions, is that there weren't police officers to be made redundant, and indeed you can't make a police officer redundant. We naturally lose through retirement every year a number of police officers, and there was a period of time that got us down to the number that I inherited of where recruitment was frozen and indeed held down for a significant number of years. We are now, as I've said, recruiting significant numbers every year, and indeed have replaced those that have been leaving. The very last bit in relation to your local policing team, you obviously, I'm not here to speak for the Chief Constable, but the reassurance I've had as the elected representative is that when vacancies do occur, that safer neighbour teams are a priority. Now, it's never going to be seamless from one to the other. People are ill, people leave, people do other roles, people get promoted. It's absolutely what we need. But ultimately, in policing, I am absolutely certain that the right resources are there when we need them. And indeed, the system of local policing, that safer neighbourhood team, is in a better place than we've had it in terms of them being available for those duties. But that also comes, and the very, very last bit of my long answer, is in the time when we had less, we saw those local teams, those officers who were trying to do that community work, drawn out to response work dealing with the emergencies as they've come in. So as I've invested in the wider system, it will ensure your local police officers have more of the time where they want to be, and we want them to be, based in our community, doing that community work.
Thanks, Tom. Just before you follow up on that, I mean, the question I think Tom was kind of part alluding to is, and what you alluded to there, John, was in terms of actually the feeling and perception that policing numbers are up, and the information that we're getting through our various councillors and through the Community Safety Forum, that actually visibility isn't as high, and key events police used to be at aren't turning up or due to lack of staffing, and that the visibility should be, well, more prominent and in key parts of the city and at those community events. Appreciated, other policing matters do come in hand and emergencies do come along, but the perception has been a downward spiral.
Is Tom going to follow up, and then I'll pick that up if that's helpful.
Do you want to follow up?
Thank you again, Chen. John, thank you very much for your long and detailed answer. I suppose when it comes to the figures, I'll be more than happy, rather than getting into the sort of Trumpian debate about alternative facts, share the facts, the figures I received from your office with the press afterwards. And in terms of getting to the bottom of what's behind the facts, we'll have a chance to see each other at the Police and Crime panel, which I'll be representing this council on. So looking forward to that. I still would like to make sure that the invitation, the heartfelt invitation, is extended, and you will be most welcome on our patch. The one thing which I'm worried about is, just to pick up on what Councillor Rias said, is that it's not only the perception of residents, taxpayers. It's not only my perception, other people around here, what they think. It's the independent inspectorate issuing reports which say very clearly, black and white, that there are policing issues, that the solving crime is suffering because of a number of issues, and depleted numbers are one of them. So I'm just want to put this on record, and once again finish on a positive note, hoping to see you very soon in Batten Hall and indeed at County Hall. Thank you.
The unfortunate nature of politics, and indeed I first got elected in 2004 as a local councillor, is sometimes the search for the soundbite and getting the name in the local newspaper is a little against the interest of your community, because I would suggest to you it's solely incorrect to suggest that the numbers I'm quoting aren't true. So if you have a look at the budget report to which was published and you say, well, that's just my words, well, I have statutory officers the same as you do, so I'm not allowed to publish things that aren't true. If you have a look in there, there is a whole narrative around police officer numbers, and indeed the way they are recorded is also helpfully or unhelpfully slightly opaque, because sometimes the way the government record them are different to the way we record them, because they I think sometimes want to ensure that they're as positive as they can be, whereas we use true headcount to ensure that the accurate number is reflected. But as I say, have a look at my budget report, and it sets them all out in there. Because I know it's very clear, as Councillor Riaz said, that if we don't feel that we have enough, there is ultimately a problem, isn't it? I have to be more effective with the resources I've got, or I have to make more resources available, and we have done hopefully some of both. But what I would also say is, coming back to that demand piece earlier that we talked about, when I first joined the police authority in 2005, cybercrime wasn't as prevalent as it is now. We are seeing huge numbers of mental health demands on West Mercia Police. We're seeing huge amounts of domestic abuse again, and sexual violence again has to be investigated behind closed doors and draws people away from being visible on the front line. But to reassure you further, and as you're reading my budget report in detail, I think it's 64 pages, but it's well worth the perseverance, you'll see that visibility and accessibility is absolutely central of the improvements that I've tasked the Chief Constable with delivering for me during this next year, and indeed I measure it. And as you join the police and crime panel, as Councillor Riaz will tell you, the perceptions and confidence survey that we regularly report often talks about that, and you will see that visibility of policing has been stubbornly static in a period of time that hasn't reflected the significantly more resources that we now have.
Thank you, John. Councillor Tisera.
Thank you, Chair. I represent Warndon, and there is a small police station there which is open to the public in very restricted times. Can you tell me what your plan or your expectation is for how that station will continue to operate now that a larger station, I think actually immediately behind it, or at least offices, has now opened?
So did you say Warndon? Sorry,
I did. Warndon.
Yeah. So you are correct. So if you've ever been in the Warndon police base, it's split across two sites. So it's one of the old flats, one assumes, and then the shop at the front. So you are correct. We've moved into the housing property next door, so fit for purpose, and indeed signed up to be there for a while, depending on what might get developed in the future. But it's literally next door. So exactly, in fact, an enhanced provision is available and will continue to be available there. And the view being, you're correct that there isn't a front counter in that sense, but the agreement I have from the Chief Constable and the policy she is keen to endorse, that when an officer is in place, or a PCSO, that they put an A board outside and with it on saying an officer is here, and there's a doorbell, and you can go in and talk to the officer if you need to be. So exactly the same. It's next door. I get it's slightly set back a few yards, but is cementing them in place for longer than they would have been if we'd stayed in the existing premises.
Okay, I'm confused. So the police officers I saw this afternoon told me they belong to that station, and they said that they have a front desk, but it won't be the one that they used to be. So this A board, where's it going to go? Is it going to go onto Cranham Parade, or is it round the back? Because they told me in future not round the back.
So no, not round the back, round the front. There's either some confusion from then or from how the local supervision have supported them. So the A board will be at the front of the building of Cranham Road side, to which exactly the same as it is now, because there's no front counter in the new one. I know there's that weird reception area where actually there's some lockers in there as well, isn't there? But exactly the same provision will be next door, but bigger and indeed more fit for purpose as to where they are now. But again, access from the roadside, not from the yard at the rear.
But when will it be open? When will it be open?
We're just waiting for my IT. I actually thought it had been already, but I don't know for certain. But it's imminent is the timescale descriptor I'd use.
be, unless some strange thing happened, it would be open. Not today. And I wasn't able to get when it would be that time in future, because my residents often ask it, and they also really would like it to be open a lot more than it has been, and therefore that's why I'm asking about the plan for that. To have it accessible, clearly accessible and open, is a very comforting thing for the people around. I think the local SNT force is excellent, actually. I have meetings with them very often. They have complained to me about the fact that they are very often diverted onto other activities. And they also told me today that their numbers had been reduced to 3. I don't know what it used to be, but I think I've certainly seen a lot more than that in those stations before, but they're now just 3. So again, I'm confused as to what I'm being told on the ground from the officers, and the picture you're painting, which would be great to see, of, you know, a significant investment and a maintenance or even an uplift into local policing, which is so valuable.
So, so there's a number of bits in there that I will attempt to pick out. So first of all, to be clear, the police station is open, as in it is a functioning operational police base. There isn't a front counter there, as in a permanent presence, and there won't be for the foreseeable future, because I am not prioritising additional resources to make a front counter. So when it is available to the public, it would mean an officer or PCSO who might be doing other duties are there and making themselves available. So that investment in having somebody there permanent to give the perhaps the service that you allude to, i.e. be open more often, is very hard to do. But there will be somebody in that base fairly regularly during office hours, and indeed the A board should be outside. And the bit how we balance that out is by giving them direct access to the public, to those police officers, by advertising their mobile numbers, their direct mobile numbers, their email addresses, and obviously their names and faces. Neighbourhood Matters, if you Google Neighbourhood Matters, you can pop your postcode in and it will give you your local policing teams, and that's how you'll know whether they're changing as well, ironically. So if you have a look on there, you can see how many are in your particular area, but there will be more than one safer neighbourhood team based in there. And I also know there are some other problem-solving teams based in the new building as well. At the very last bit, I would say, is that I too recognise the reassurance that physical buildings are, but it has to be balanced between the ensuring that those teams are being effective as well, rather than just present at a site waiting for people to go and visit them. So my ask of the Chief Constable is that it's balanced, is that when somebody's in the building, they're accessible, but ultimately they should be improving, as I said before to Councillor Petrolsky, is about making sure that they are visible and accessible to more and more of the community through the investments that we are making. And very lastly, I would say, if you're not getting what you think you're getting, have a chat with the local inspector or the sergeant, who again will be listed on that Neighbourhood Matters page that I referred to. You'll not knowing exactly how
the question can go away, but I'm just, you know, yeah.
If you pop your postcode into that Neighbourhood Matters website, it'll list all of your teams for you.
Other questions, please.
Come to Sarah. I've got 2 other councillors.
I know, I'll be very quick. Do you encourage the local S&Ts to work with the housing associations as well, as a principle?
Bread and butter work of the Safe Neighbourhood teams, not only working with housing providers, but also council and indeed other voluntary and statutory agencies. So my expectation would be that West Mercia Police are using all elements of the CSP system, all those statutory partners, to be effective, and that's why I've been concerned in recent times of perhaps the lack of effectiveness of the community safety partnership here in this part of West Mercia.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Lawrenson. Sorry, Councillor Hodgson.
Yes, I've got a couple of questions here. First of all, as well as the City Council, I'm also a parish councillor, I'm Warden Parish Council. And traditional at the toward the start of our monthly meetings, we have a representative from the local policing team who comes to speak, and often residents will attend the meeting, and they will often have a point they want to raise that does have a policing matter related to it. We haven't had a policing representative for about three or 4 months, which is, you know, the longest gap I've had since being on the parish council. So can I have assurances that we will get representation from the police at our parish council meeting, because otherwise the information we do get sent from the police to the parish council is excellent. The first question.
Thank you, Chairman. There's something called, that was launched 2 years ago, the Community Charter, which sets out all of the commitments that West Mercia Police give to their communities, including partners such as parish councils. Within that, it says that they will agree with the parish council what that relationship should be like. As a minimum, that there will be that attendance every 3 months. So I don't know whether there's something that's not quite worked in yours for some welfare reasons. I don't know, but that commitment is there, that they have that appropriate relationship. Now, in some places like yours, I know it's an attendance and they have that engagement. Other places it might be engagement with the clerk, but the obligation within the charter is to ensure that it's agreed with the parish council what that relationship looks like.
And the second question is really about the quite range of community support you've actually given over the years. I know you've provided smart water, which our residents have found quite useful. I understand you also give grants to parish councillors for speed indicator devices. I manage the ones in Warden Villages on behalf of the parish council. Could you sort of give the committee just an overview of the range of sort of such services like that you can actually offer local communities, just so that we're aware of what there actually is?
Hopefully from the question and the answer to Councillor Lamb earlier, I believe in sometimes a small amount of money to build up the coalition to get something done is really important. So things like giving the 50% funding towards the vehicle activated signs, the funding towards getting smart water done, really important, because it's not 100% funding, because you've got to work with the community, because I'm quite a remote figure from a parish, aren't I? You don't get any closer to the community than a parish councillor, and indeed I've got an electorate of 900,000 adults. So using and supporting those local community groups to be more effective is particularly important to me. So I ensure that not only do we have those direct schemes that you've just referred to, I also have the money that I refer to around the superintendent has, the Commissioner's Community Fund. It's also pots of money that your community safety partnership have. And ultimately, I have been a little bit disappointed that the effective use of that money here in this part of West Mercia, because I don't think it has been deployed, I think, in line in where we should be. But I know there's been progress recently, and I think the system is back up and running. But ultimately, I also run a number of schemes, and it's always worth an ask. So my view would be to your parish colleagues, or indeed the City Council, if there is a scheme that needs some support, always up for a conversation, because we can do some of the standard things that you referred to, but sometimes it's those more bespoke solutions to that particular problem that might need a more innovative approach, and we're always up for that as a conversation.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to address firstly the situation where on the 23rd, 24th and 25th of May, the Worcester City Police Station front counter was closed. So we've been asked that by a resident. They would like to understand that. I'd also like to understand how many of the police officers in these numbers are purely in an administrative role, and how many of them are actually out there dealing with crime activity in the streets, as we would traditionally consider a police officer. Obviously, those dealing with cybercrime probably won't be out there. And the visibility, you say about the visibility, we had our CNT team. I last saw one of our lead police officers at Pride last year, and then we were unable to make any form of regular contact with our with our lead of the team, including not showing up at meetings, and it ended up in the previous packed meeting that 4 city councillors and 1 county councillor showed up to talk to the community groups and ended up discussing an email that had been sent from the CMT team. I have to say, I am very pleased to say that we went to a packed meeting last night and the new sergeant has showed up and brought 2 members of his team with him. So I think from that discussion, that is at an end. But I echo, this is probably happening in other wards, that the levels of the teams are going up and down. So I'm very pleased with our team and the promise that they will be visible, and in fact already are visible. And I've managed to meet all 4 of them. But I feel that my colleagues might not be getting that sort of level of service, and there's peaks and troughs. So that would be my last point. Thank you.
Thank you. The front counter issue, first of all, there have been some vacancies and indeed some sicknesses have meant that front counter, not just in Worcester actually, also elsewhere, because they do move the staff around, have meant that we have had some closures. So some urgent work to recruit, fill the gaps that are there to ensure that there is the operational front counter in line with the hours that are advertised, because that's the certainty I want to give residents, to know when those main police station front counters are open. And I know that is something that the Chief Constable is aware and indeed actively taking action to change. It's not quick, unfortunately, because getting people in place and indeed vetted will take a while, but I understand there is some considerations what interim measures can be put into place to maybe not mitigate all of the unplanned closures, but to at least mitigate some of them. Your last point around policing, because you've articulated the journey that sometimes it goes around, i.e. when a vacancy happens, it does take a while to fill and then things settle down again. The bit I would pick out of the second part of your question is, it should be a team. It should never be all of the members of that local policing team, because often it's 1 or 2 PCs supported by a sergeant and inspector, supported by 2, 3, 4 PCSOs, depending on which ward it is. So if one person is missing, I get, it's not great. It's very rare that all of them would be, hence why we advertise, as I was referring to earlier, all of the team contact details, and there's often the group email address that all of them get access to. So if somebody is off sick, then or not there, then somebody else should pick it up. So the citizen, it should be seamless, not dependent on one person if they happen not to be there. But I do get your point, and it's one I was alluding to earlier. I've got the commitment to the Chief Constable that when that vacancy does happen, that it is filled as swiftly as possible. Vacancies will happen, and sometimes they will go longer than I or you would want them to happen. What I have got to do is ensure that the Chief Constable has that operational independence, to which she is lawfully entitled to do, to manage her resources as she sees fit. And that also links to your other question about where they all are in policing. So some of our police officers will be behind desks doing jobs to which we won't see them, but all of them should be doing a role that is appropriate for a police officer. And indeed, some forces are far more de-civilianised than West Mercia is. West Mercia is actually quite high in terms of having the number of civilians versus police officers. But the last bit I would add in terms of where we see police officers doing maybe what you describe as more administrative or other roles is, as was alluded to earlier, policing can be quite taxing physically and mentally. So sometimes we have police officers who aren't able to be deployed in the physical sense, so therefore will be used for those desk roles in the interim as they recover and indeed go through their recuperation journey. So there will always be a place for police officers doing roles outside of the public view. My mission as Commissioner is to make sure that enough of those resources are focused on the front line, and the right system to support those officers who are in recuperation are supported to come back as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the last previous CNT, we showed up, we had an email, we attempted to contact the CNT team. I attempted to contact the head of CNT to find that person had changed roles, our lead police officer had changed roles, and nobody had chosen to inform us. or the PAC committee. I think that is just a common courtesy, and I think it's something that perhaps could be taken forward. You know, we sat there and we were all busy people, and that 5 councillors were staring at each other, I thought was an unacceptable rudeness. Thank you.
I agree. So I think the system is paying for a number of representatives of the service in your community. When the changes happened, my expectation and the Chief Constable's is that all efforts are made to ensure that those partner relationships are maintained, and the courtesy you refer to is one that I would expect. Sometimes it doesn't happen, sometimes it doesn't happen effectively, but the expectation that it does is there. The other bit I would say around helping me do my role is if there are issues to which you don't think you're getting the right support and you've used the local supervision, the sergeant or inspector, don't be afraid to raise it with my office, and either we can point you in the right direction in the force, or indeed on your behalf support getting an answer. I know your particular team are active. I've been out with them several times, and indeed, as they've changed in different phases of change, I know that as well. But I know that the good work that they do in that part of the city is impactful, and I, like you, want them there more of the time doing that work.
Yeah, thank you. And it has almost been immediately recognised that they are actually there, so we would like to not see them absent again. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have Councillor Hannah Cooper?
Thank you, Chair. We've seen in the news lots of forces having problems with institutional racism and institutional misogyny. I wonder what assurances you can give me in terms of West Mercia's police's culture and how you challenge misogyny and racism, please.
So I'm a national lead as part of diversity, equality and inclusion on behalf of commissioners. So I've been involved in some of the national work. It is a central part of my Safe West Mercia plan that everybody feels safe and is safe. There is inequality in our society, and it will be in our police service. We've seen in recent times police officers held accountable for racist behaviour, misogyny, and we've seen them held accountable for sexual violence. And that's just within the last month, and those are all West Mercia police officers. The Chief Constable, when she was appointed the August before last, one of the first things that she did was put inclusion into the force values, and it is at the very centre of the work that she is doing to ensure that the service is inclusive. I don't know about labels about institutional racism or not, or indeed institutionally inclusive. But what I do know is some of the processes, some of the systems in place, some of the way that we do things are not inclusive, i.e. how we vet staff, for example. Is it inclusive of people who might not lead a traditional lifestyle? That's just one very small example. What I do know is that some of the horrific acts that we've seen reported in places like London is a wake-up call for policing and in West Mercia, and I am seeing action. What I'm not yet fully reassured about is that it's been wholly effective. I've been embarrassed in the last month to see the behaviour of some police officers being held accountable publicly, because it's not what I want, and I don't think it's what the public want. I support the Chief Constable in her mission. I've given her more resources for things like professional standards. My view would be, if we still feel like this in a year, 2 years' time, i.e. seeing those being still having to be rooted out, then there's a problem, isn't there? Because ultimately the qualities you refer to have no place in our society, let alone in our police, who we hold rightly to a higher standard.
Thanks, John. I've got a number of questions before I bring finally John Petrowski in. Thanks for alluding to that. One of my questions was obviously regarding confidence in actual police officers, given the famous cases in London around Wayne Couzens and the Severo Everard case, and actually the increase in sexual violence certainly within my patch here, within the city centre, and the increases that's having. Recently, we've been successful in our Purple Flag bid as well, which shows a certain level of confidence that people should have when coming to our city centre and bringing in that economic benefit and for women and girls to be safe on our streets. What confidence can you give and reassurances to the City of Worcester that we have full confidence in our policing and the appropriate checks and vetting is in place to make sure the right people get through?
Very complex question to which there is no straightforward, but I pick some bits out that help give me some reassurance in the area that you refer. Vetting is part of it, but it's not the only bit, because lots of people who turned out to be horrific, horrifically responsible for some horrific crimes would have passed vetting. But the system of vetting is still important. West Mercia was judged by HMIC in a recent inspection to over-vet, i.e. It went further than was required, which is a good thing, I think, not as a bad thing. There is a national revetting going on at the moment, to which West Mercia has embraced and indeed will do as required by the autumn. It will likely bring to the attention of those whose behaviours we do not necessarily want to see. So it will happen, and therefore that should give reassurance that will help rout out the behaviours that we've talked about. Because I think that's the other bit. It's the routing out. It's not just dealing with it when we see it, is actively seeking it out. And I referred to the Chief Constable's personal mission and talking about inclusion before. She is very clear. It's incumbent on all West Mercians when they see or hear the behaviour that we're referring to, that it's their responsibility to call it out and report it. And the instance we've recently seen going through the dismissal process, large numbers of those are a result of other West Mercians say that's not a value for a police officer and it's not right, and indeed has been tackled and those held accountable. And I do see that as central to dealing with this, is ensuring that those who are rightly in the service disgusted as I am at some of that behaviour, that they are empowered to act, and indeed ultimately it is then acted upon by the organisation, which gives me confidence. And the very, very last bit is about the role of us as the citizenry. When we see behaviour that we don't like, it's having that confidence to report, whether or not it is directly to West Mercia Police, and you can report if you believe an officer is behaving in a way that they shouldn't to West Mercia Police's Professional Standards Department, and if you don't want to do that, you can do it to the IOPC, who are independent from West Mercia Police, or indeed you can do it anonymously through to Crime Stoppers. So there is always a route for us as a citizen to express our concern if we have it, because that's the only thing I think that will continue to rout it out, is by us, the citizenry and the police officers, standing up and saying that's not what we want in our police service, and then my reassurance that it gets acted on appropriately.
Presumably then there a culture of a safe haven for whistleblowers, so to speak, or is provided, and that reassurance is that there'll be no repercussions on those officers that speak up against other officers.
It's incumbent on warranted officers to speak up, and indeed it's in their Pelion principles, and indeed there isn't repercussion for those that whistleblow, and indeed I as Commissioner have a role in the whistleblowing policy within West Mercia, and I am reassured that that is wholly and indeed deeply rooted in the mission that the Chief is leading.
Thank you. I'll take the final speaker, Councillor Tom Protarski.
Thank you again, Chair, and thank you for putting up with us, John. I mean, I do not doubt your commitment to diversity inclusion, not for a second, and I'd like to sort of publicly recognise that. What I do have a problem with, though, is it's brilliant. One could be forgiven for sort of thinking that we have a well-polished politician in front of us. I mean, the reality is the appointment last year of the new Chief Constable was how many years since your appointment. However, the culture issues within West Mercia have been going on for quite some time when you were in charge. And that includes a police officer, just thinking of one thing which was reported by a Shropshire newspaper some time ago. A police officer investigated for sexual harassment in the workplace, being moved to a team which provides support for crime victims. So, I mean, we can talk about sound bites and whatever. I think it would be good to take responsibility where responsibility ought to be taken, and actually reassure people, women, men, everybody around here, that this is not a sudden sort of wake-up call, that this should have been done since 2016 when you were in the office. Thank you.
I'm sure you will have taken the time to have read my police and crime plans that I have published in the 2 terms that I have served. And whilst I'm grateful for your, I think it's a compliment to say I'm a well-polished politician, but you will see that inclusion has been at the centre of both of those plans. And Chief Constable wasn't appointed last year; it was some 20 or so months ago, so the year before. And indeed, it is acted on and it is dealt with in the way that you described. But there's been also a cultural shift during that time. And without meaning to be controversial, I've seen the same cultural shift in this council in terms of getting violence against women and girls further up the agenda than it was before. And Worcester City is no different in that. I've seen it in other councils in West Mercia. So do I think more could be done? Then of course I could. Of course, more can always be done. Have I prioritised inclusion and indeed ensuring domestic abuse and indeed issues that disproportionately affect women and girls? Yes, I absolutely can. I'm responsible for the reason why there is a domestic abuse perpetrator programme in Worcestershire. I'm responsible to why it's also now in Herefordshire, Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin. I'm responsible for ensuring that the victim services that disproportionately, unfortunately, have to support women and girls has been increased significantly since I got elected. Now, you can happily trot out things that make you feel better about my tenure, and I shall look forward to you criticising my tenure when I seek re-election. But absolutely, I can tell you, the very centre of what I've been trying to do is to ensure all of my communities are safe and feel safe. And I've constantly called out the fact that women and girls are disproportionately affected as victims, and that has been around for a very long time, and we ultimately have to change that. I know that that is not just a West Mercia job or a John Campion job, it's a societal job. And I not only ask you to reflect on my performance, I would also ask you to reflect on the organisations that you're part of, because that's the only way we're ultimately going to change it, if society together and all its institutions act to fix it, because it's been going on too long and it doesn't have place in our modern society.
Yeah, thank you, John. I mean, just that part of your previous question brings me on to a slightly different point before I sum up, in terms of actually the impact of a lot of mental health cases on the mental health of our police officers, and what support and provision is there, and you know, how many long-term absences have been as a result of the traumatizing effect of some of the casework that they deal with, and how are we supporting our police officers to be through their personal traumas.
So, hopefully consigned to history, the such phrases as "man up" and all those kind of things. So there is a recognition of the impact, first of all, to which I am reassured the Chief Constable and her team have, and indeed then a system of support, both internally within the organisation and commission services that are provided. I don't know whether I'm being controversial when I say it or not, but mental health is one of those areas in our society where there isn't enough provision. We deal with acute, we don't deal with it at those early stages effectively enough. Whilst in policing we do have some of those early interventions, we are reflective of those wider community where we do not see a good system of effective mental health support. And linked to that, I would suggest the inappropriate use of policing for dealing with mental health in society is again part of why we're seeing disproportionately police officers affected by the work that they are dealing with that perhaps they shouldn't be.
Okay, thank you. Well, I mean, can I personally thank you from behalf of the committee and behalf of the city for attending here this evening and answering hopefully some straightforward questions and some more awkward ones. Really appreciate the work that you're doing and that the police officers and the front line are doing. Keep up the good work, and hopefully good luck in everything you're doing.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, then agenda item 7. Agenda item 6. I was jumping ahead. Hopefully, you've seen seen what you're in for, right? Is anybody introducing? No, we're going straight in. First of all, can I personally thank you for responding to our request to come here. It's been a long time coming. I think it's the first time that Sanctuary have addressed us in this committee format anyway, in terms of that concern. It is all part of our my personal commitment to the city and our group's commitment in terms of being able to bring our housing providers in and being able to ask the questions. You form a key part of the infrastructure of the city and are obviously a massive employer within the city, so you have an economic benefit to us as well. And we really wanted for you to explain what plans you have for us for this city and what you've been doing. So all over to you.
Thank you very much for having us. I think we've got some slides that we will have shared on the screen that we will talk to. Just to introduce ourselves, my name's Sophie Bell. I'm the Head of Development for the Midlands for Sanctuary. I've got my colleagues Yvonne Crinian, who is our Operations Manager for our housing team. We've got Rebecca Craig, who is our Director of Sustainability and Climate Change, and then Steve Ward at the end, who is our Operations Manager for Asset Delivery. For those of you who do or don't know Sanctuary, we are a national organisation. We are a not-for-profit. Anything we do with our sort of profit-making activities is reinvested back into our core business of delivering affordable housing. We have 105,000 homes nationally now. We are one of the UK's largest housing providers. We also have 115 residential care homes, around 650 supported living schemes, and around 10,000 student rooms as well. So our business activities are quite diverse. And we have nationally about 13,500 staff. But as Councillor Riaz has said, in Worcester is our head office, as it were. Our centre of our operations are here, and we are one of the city's largest employers. If you'd like to skip forward, please, to the next slide after that one. So we are driven by our charitable and social purpose and our values. We have been consciously adopting our values and really trying to embody that in everything that we do. We've recently published a corporate strategy for the next 3 years, which our sort of 3 main strategic objectives are around putting our customers first, investing in our existing assets, and also growing our services. And we are going to sort of talk around some of those points today. We have tried to pick out topics which we believe will be of interest to the committee, as sort of prompted by Tom. If there is anything that we don't cover that you'd like to know more about, we're more than happy to take questions, obviously, and we can also take questions away to feedback with any information. As we are so diverse, though, we could have probably brought 12 colleagues with us today to try and tackle everything that we do. So I'm going to hand over now to Yvonne, who is going to talk to you about Sanctuary housing operations and specifically what we have in the city.
Thank you. Shall I move this slightly there? Okay, so more of an operational perspective from myself, just to explain the Sanctuary Housing's presence in Worcester. We have got a total of 671 units of accommodation in the Worcestershire area. Just shy of 400 sit within my own portfolio, which is the general needs and housing for older people properties. Majority of those being affordable rented homes that are 1 and 2 bedrooms. And the remainder of the units are a mix of shared ownership, right to buys, supported housing, and something like 123 rooms in care homes. How we let our homes, this is currently under review at the moment, but most of our vacancies are let through nominations from the council through the choice-based letting scheme, Housing for You. 90% of those lets are made this way, with the option of 10% of lets that we can use as management transfers. Circumstances in which we would do that would normally be quite extenuating circumstances. So if there's an urgent need for one of our residents to move because there's domestic abuse, or perhaps we identify damp and mould problems in a property and need to rehouse a vulnerable household urgently, then we would use our management transfer. How we deliver our housing services. Locally, we have a team of housing staff, 2 housing officers, an income officer and 1 scheme manager serving our Housing for Older People schemes of Noel Court and Wormstrey. We have adopted what we call a hybrid approach to working, and we follow the us to you approach. And the idea being that our local staff are on site as much as possible, and we utilise the office space at Castle Street when we need to. These local staff are complemented by 2 customer service centres, and that's an option for customers to use report or repair 24 hours a day. They can lodge a complaint, they can report antisocial behaviour, they can talk to someone from income to discuss rental payments, among other things. The team that I manage, housing officers and scheme managers, they have a very wide-ranging housing management role, from fire and water safety checks to viewing and signing up new customers, estate inspections, resident engagement activities, property inspections to support terminations of tenancies and mutual exchange requests, investigating reports of antisocial behaviour, and in so doing working closely with our partner agencies, often conducting joint visits with our colleagues in the local police where the situation warrants that. Staff are well trained to identify signs of domestic abuse or any safeguarding issues which may require discreet intervention and onward referral. And we also have an interactive website where self-service is encouraged. A couple of initiatives I wanted to draw to your attention. We have the Warm Welcome initiative. This was where our Sustainable Communities team and housing teams worked together to offer carpets and curtains to new residents identified as having little or nothing to start up a home. We do actually have people who apply for housing and they are in the clothes that they're standing in, and that is a welcome boost to them. It enables people who need our help to start their tenancy with a warm home that they can be proud of, and it's better prospects going forward for them to sustain their tenancy longer term. The other initiative that we have used is our furniture project, again provided for our most vulnerable new customers. And what we do there is we provide Argos vouchers so that they can purchase household items, making their house move as stress-free as possible. And those vouchers are provided free of charge, and the items purchased are retained, are theirs to keep. We did receive lovely feedback last week from a single parent with 3 children who benefited from these initiatives, and she said, "I'm honestly lost for words. Don't know how to show my gratitude for all the wonderful help you've given me. This has changed the lives of my 3 kids, and we're all so thankful to you at Sanctuary." And I thought it was nice to let you know that we do get some nice compliments sometimes. Hot and cold properties. As part of our customer first approach, we have introduced cold or quiet property checks. And that's where we haven't received contact from our customers for up to 2 years. That allows us to check on the welfare and identify any unmet support needs. We've also, at the other end of the spectrum, introduced hot property checks, and that's where we identify an above average number of visits to the home, and that enables us then to offer signposting and support, again, addressing any underlying needs. So the sort of thing is, for example, if we're constantly sending tradesmen out to a property and they're repairing the roof and they're repairing the boiler time and time again, is that an indication that, you know, we need to replace that rather than keep repairing the item? And potentially repeated requests from individuals for a whole series of potentially arguably relatively minor issues could be a sign that that customer is suffering mental health, and it could be interpreted as a cry for help. So it's important that we go down that route. So if we could move to the next slide, thank you. Sanctuary as an employer in Worcester. We've got 1,170 employees based in Worcester, so we are a very big employer in the area. We have 3 graduates based in our head office at Chamber Court, 14 apprentices working within the Worcestershire area, and also we are a sponsor of Worcester Pride and the Worcestershire Apprenticeship Awards, and Worcester Cornerstone Employer. Any other information regarding that, please, if it's all right, Tom, channel through yourselves, and we can certainly respond to any requests for information. If I could hand back now to Sophie, thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Sanctuary and our development programme sort of nationally, and then obviously how that relates to what we have delivered or are delivering in the future in Worcester. So We have previously had our affordable homes programme with Homes England 2016 to 21 programme that we've delivered homes across the country. This Homes England funding relates obviously to our development within England. We do have a grant funding programme in Scotland. Within Worcester, we delivered Cranham Drive, which for those of you who aren't aware, in Warndon, it was where we used to have a care home. When we delivered a new care home out in St John's on our Sanctuary Grove Care and Supported Living site, most of the residents chose to relocate to the new care home. There was then less of a need for a care home at that site, and having appraised what we could do with it, we decided that we would deliver some new schemes there. I'll talk a bit more about that in a later slide. Our next programme with Homes England is the 21-26 programme. We have strategic partnership status with Homes England. We are delivering homes across England again through that programme, and we're hoping to include the Sanson Walk development within that, 40 new homes there. Currently across England and Scotland, we're on site with over 2,000 homes. This is a mix of different types of development. Some of them are fully affordable housing tenures, so that could be affordable rent, social rent, intermediate housing, shared ownership, those types of products. We also do outright sale homes now, where we use the cross subsidy from the sale of market sale properties to help subsidise the delivery of the affordable tenures. Something that's sort of relatively unique to Sanctuary, although I think it's becoming slightly more common, is we do have an in-house construction business now. So some of our sites that we build out, it is our own internal contractor that's doing that work, which gives us a lot more control over what we're delivering, and has actually, in the current sort of economic climate where we've seen a lot of small contractors and developers go into administration, liquidation, has been a saving as we've been able to step in and finish delivering schemes ourselves. We were subject to a scheme in Malvern actually, so obviously not Worcester City, but Worcestershire, where our contractor went into liquidation a year ago, but we have been able to pick that up and finish the delivery of those homes using our in-house construction team. One of our other sort of key development aims at the moment is our inclusion by design strategy, where we have developed standardised house types that are sort of the Sanctuary standard now, and our own standard specification, to ensure that we're delivering new homes that aren't just suitable for people now, they're suitable for people in the future as well, and that is inclusive for our customers and residents. I'd like to go to the next slide. This is our Cranham Drive development for those who don't know it. It was completed in October 2021. It's 34 new homes, mix of apartments and houses. It was built by our internal Sanctuary construction team and had Homes England grant funding. We worked with the local community and stakeholders there for some additional projects. We worked with the local school and Worcester Community Trust. Obviously, they've got a hub base just round from where our site was. We also worked with the city and county councils here in terms of the requirements for who was on the housing waiting lists. There was also a family identified for one of the properties where there were some additional adaptations that would be required, but because we identified that early, we were able to deliver it whilst we were still on site, which was a much more cost-effective way of doing it than finding out after we finished the houses and having to go back and retrofit adaptations for those customers. Next slide, please. And then this is the Sanson Walk site, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, the former swimming pool site. We have got a resolution to grant planning from Planning Committee last March. We are continuing our discussions with the City Council regarding the remediation of the site. We will again be using our internal construction team to deliver this, which again gives us more sort of control over cost and delivery, which we won't be having to go out to the market to tender that, which at the moment is proving challenging. We have got additional sustainability features that we looked at, which was a requirement of our initial bid to the council. We'll be using modern methods of construction, so timber frame for the houses and a panelised steel frame system for the apartments. So there's still work to be done to bring this scheme forward, but we're confident we will be delivering it within our 21-26 programme, again with the grant funding that we have secured from Homes England. I'm going to hand over now to Steve, who's going to talk about sort of our existing homes and assets.
Thank you. So I work in our public services team, so alongside our ops manager for day-to-day and voids. We've got an internal plan team and also our estates team. my role is our existing properties and how we invest in them. So we prioritise work by the work it needs doing each year by our knowledge of the properties, so stock condition surveys, our repairs team and history, and our local housing team for their information on properties. Our planned improvements differ from reactive repairs. So reactive repairs are obviously more tenant-led. We're tending to resolve a problem that they've reported, and our planned work is more proactive rather than reactive. Each year we need to balance the desire to invest in our homes with what budget we have to spend to make sure we're investing in the right areas. So in Worcester currently, so our planned works for this year in the area, Warmesbury Court, housing for elderly people scheme, so it's going to be a lift refurbishment. Lear Close, window replacements, so we've done a couple of other streets in that area over the last few years, so we're aware that one is a similar sort of standard. And then Kenilworth Court, we've had quite a few ongoing roof leaks there over the last few years, so now we're going to do a major programme to replace the roof. John Gwynn House, so just down the road from here. It's a property we've got which has been affected by flooding for a number of years, so we are looking to do some works there to alter some of the flats which are affected the most. So we've just received planning and building consent for some works there to create a new walkway so we can provide safe access and egress, because when the area floods, that there is difficulty getting to them properties. And then last year, just some works we have recently completed in the area. Downland Gardens, which is nearly close, we've done the doors, windows, roof line replacements. And then Warmesbury Court, we've just replaced all the flat entrance doors. So that was picked up in an FRA, but they were recently ended their life, needed replacement. So that's something we've just recently completed. And then we've got a big issue with stock condition surveys, where we've got a new housing regulator target to reach. So we are increasing our surveys in the area to make sure we've got accurate, up-to-date data on our properties. That's throughout the Midlands, but obviously Worcester will be included within that. Next slide, please. Obviously, damp and mould is a major thing at the moment. So, Sanctuary, we've got 5 commitments to our customers to resolve this. There's a link at the bottom to where tenants have information on our website, but essentially it's 5-stage commitment. So it's zero tolerance approach to damp and mould with a 4-step process to identify, remedy, resolve and prevent. We don't want to be going back to properties when we want to resolve it first time. So when we're contacted by our customers, we work with them to diagnose the problem at an early stage. We tailor our approach based upon the understanding our customers' needs. Sometimes we've obviously moved tenants out while we've done work and then move them back in if that's what's required. We make sure our teams have skills and understanding to tackle the issue effectively. All our ops have been given damp and mould treatment kits, so they have them on their vans. If they attend a property, they're able to at least treat the mould whilst on site, and we may re-attend at a later date to do further works to prevent it happening in the future. And we might not always get it right first time, but what we do work with the customers to remedy it as quickly as possible. That's it from my point. So over to.
I think it's me next.
Yep.
So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're doing on sustainability at Sanctuary, and sort of more specifically what we're up to in Worcester. So I think we're probably quite short on time. So I'd just say we're about to publish our updated sustainability report. So if this is of particular interest to you, that should be coming out in the next month or so. And that will give a full overview of all of our drivers and decision making that's at the heart of our decarbonisation plan for Sanctuary as a whole. So a few key targets there. Firstly, we've set ourselves the target of achieving EPC and C for all of our residential properties by 2030. And I'll talk a bit more about where we are in Worcester on that in a minute. We have in 2022-23, we invested 1.5 million into our communities, which we matched with 2.6 million funding from our suppliers. So all of that goes directly into our communities and to support customers, and particularly with a focus on building resilience and connections. So very much a customer-led approach to investment. And as you can see there, we make sure that they are at the heart of all of our work, even on the environmental side of things. So next slide. In Worcester, we're working on multiple projects. I'd say, given a few key ones there. So at the moment, we're working closely with the University of Worcester on the development of an environmental management system. So this is a project focused on building an integrated process or integrated processes across our 18 central office locations, which will allow us to manage our environmental risk, monitor compliance, and make sure we've got really strong governance in place across those central locations for environmental management. And the university have a very similar process in place already and have been very supportive as we work with them. We've also piloted electric vehicles for a group of colleagues based here in Worcester, with the installation of EV charge points, both at Sanctuary House and at their homes themselves, so that they have the option. This has been really helpful for us, not just from a decarbonisation perspective, but also we recognise as a major employer the potential we have on sort of impacting air quality, things like that. So we're really hopeful that we can roll this out further and see sort of positive changes, both from our carbon accounting and also Worcester City Centre itself. To support that shift in active travel and sustainable travel, we're also rolling out bikeability training for our colleagues in Worcester. I think that starts next week. So one thing we hear quite a lot is people aren't always that comfortable cycling. I think if you haven't done it as an adult, it can be a little bit scary. So we're hoping that as it's nicer weather and people get the training, we can start to see some shifts there. We know a lot of commutes are relatively short, so cycling is an excellent solution for that. And to support the focus on sustainable travel, we're also going to be holding our sustainability focus fortnight, which is something we do annually, usually aligned with COP. So this will be November this year, which will have a sustainable travel focus. So hopefully there'll be a few more things we can talk about towards the end of the year. And then finally, you can see, not the best photo, so apologies for that, but some lovely wildflowers as part of No Mow May at Kenilworth Court there. And next slide, please. In terms of what we're doing more widely, I know I've picked out retrofit because I know it's something that councillors are probably interested in, and I know customers are too. So I said we've set this target of EPC Band C. In terms of where we are in Worcester, we've got about 190 of our Worcester properties on our retrofit programme list. So these are where works are needed to get them up to Band C. These are indicatively planned for 2028, 2030. So not a huge number in Worcester. The properties here are relatively high standards EPC wise. So we've got a lot of Band B properties, but wanted to make sure you knew where they are on the list. Also, our 2 care homes here in Worcester are both already EPC Band B. And then more generally with our national retrofit programme, we had a successful bid under the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Wave 1 for 345 homes split across Essex, Cheshire West and Chester and Shropshire. That is coming to an end, so that's getting those properties up to EPC Band C. And as that is completing, we're also rolling out our Wave 2.1 works. So Sanctuary are the lead bidder of the Greener Futures Partnership Consortium bid, which is quite a large bid, about 40 million in general grant levels, of which we have approximately 12.5 million to improve just over 2,000 of our properties. We've taken an approach where we focus geographically, a lot of efficiencies there, both in terms of works and customer engagement. So that means the Wave 2.1 improvements will be in the same areas, more or less, as we've seen in Wave 1. Next slide, please. So I'm standing in for Mary-Claire Watterson, who I think some of you may know, who is our community investment lead. She can't make it tonight, but she's very happy to have further conversations if anyone is particularly interested in what we're doing in community investment. So where we are with this, we have invested 56 or over 56,000 across Worcestershire since 2009. And as I said, this is focused mainly on works that will help build resilience and connection for our customers, strengthen our communities, and very much has a customer-led focus. I won't go through all of the organisations, but there's just a selection as some of the organisations and charities that we have either worked with or funded or had employee volunteering with. Next slide, please. And then just finally, I'm not sure you can see it from there, but that's a year at a glance. So last financial year for our community investment team, as I said, 1.5 million invested from us, 2.6 million invested as match funding from our suppliers. We've impacted 249 projects, and that's an interaction with about 50,000 different beneficiaries. So I just hand back, I think, to Yvonne now, but like I said, if you have any questions about this, the team is very happy to talk to you.
Thank you. So we have a number of ways that we engage with our customers to ensure that their voices are heard, and that includes our resident scrutiny panel. We're committed to having an ongoing conversation with our residents, regardless of tenure. So they've basically been at the heart of the shaping and scrutinising of our services for many years. This year, we've asked the panel, in tandem with the resident advisory panel, to help us create new service standards for our customers and design new ways for how we deliver services. The resident scrutiny panel is a fantastic asset. It challenges our senior management team about our services, including what are you doing and why are you doing it. They help us to design our services. They lead our communities of interest groups, and they decide what should be scrutinised and then pass on any recommendations to our group housing committee. So effectively, our resident scrutiny panel looks backwards at how we've delivered on the promises and commitments that we've made. We then have the resident advisory panel, and they're forward-looking. They're looking at helping us develop projects and policy in the future. Again, work closely with our senior team, our group housing board, and they enable a diverse range of residents' views to influence sanctuary services. The RAP, as we call it, ensures our residents' voices are heard. It ensures that they can influence our decision making and ensuring that they are empowered to act as a critical friend to improve the resident experience. I talked about our communities of interest groups. We have more than 1,000 sanctuary residents who engage with us through our community of interest groups. Each group focuses on one topic, so it could be the homeowners forum, complaints, estate inspections, procurement, buying goods and services, and that's bringing people together that have got similar interests, to work and improve. We work with each of our community of interest groups to help design services and check how well areas of our service are performing. We have feedback and surveys, and so we regularly ask our customers for their views as part of our continuous improvement. We complete email, telephone and in-person surveys, and the results are shared with the regulator of social housing. And of course, this activity supports the new tenant satisfaction measures introduced by the regulator in April 23. Local engagement events throughout the year, we run ad hoc events focusing on specific issues local to our communities. This might include a drop-in surgery or neighbourhood clean-up. I do know that quite recently the local housing team collaborated with Councillor Desiree to look at converting a disused piece of ground in the Woodmancourt area, and that's to convert the area to an eco area and build a bug hotel, and that's to bring children closer to nature. Our Resident Academy is a course that we run for our residents to develop their scrutiny-related knowledge and skills. That is a formal level 2 qualification developed in partnership with the Chartered Institute of Housing. Again, the link's on there for our resident engagement strategy if anybody would like any further information. And I think that wraps it up. I thank you from us for having us, and please, any questions we're happy to take.
Thank you for the comprehensive piece of information. I'll open it up to the floor. I'll have Councillor Sarah and then Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Jill de Sarah, who's the person working with your team on Woodmancote, which is a fantastic find. Last November, I found out that Sanctuary owned the land that had been forgotten, I think. And yeah, we are planning to work with the Worcester Wildlife Trust to make it as eco-friendly as possible, but accessible, because what's happened in the 15 years it's been derelict is that it's not accessible. So once the end of the nesting season has come and gone, end of August, we'll pile back in there. But in the meantime, I am sharing local surveys with the residents that live close to it, working closely with Cranham Primary School as well to get them engaged in what we build, because I'm desperately hoping we're going to have included in this some allotments. Now, those allotments will be the most expensive part of whatever gets delivered, but there are almost no others in the area. They'll be hugely popular, and I think it's a great way to get perhaps older people not wanting to typecast who has an allotment, but and young people from the school to come and have a share in that. Their fence butts right up to where the site is, so we try and make an access that could be, you know, properly locked and controlled, but you know, have a way for them to share in that. That's really, really amazing. Yeah, we're going to have a family fun day in August as well, which I know you've got some budget to help provide a little bit of ice cream or something or other. I don't know exactly what we're going to do, but yeah, the Wildlife Trust is the one that's going to lead on things like the Bug Hotel. I don't know anything about this stuff, but I'm sure it'll be so nice to have it back available to the community. But what we're not seeking to do is to reinstate the play park that used to be there, which was then decommissioned very suddenly, 16 years ago. And then everything just has grown from overgrown, become inaccessible. So that's brilliant. I want to say I'm really enjoying working on that. So, right, what have we got? There was also a case of some recently very disturbing antisocial behaviour with one of your tenants who had a dog that was eating cats, which wasn't the best thing, really. Of course, cats aren't protected, so there was not a great deal that could be done, apparently, but I was in touch with the housing officer, who's since gone on maternity leave, and she handled it very well. I understand that it's been managed, shall we say. So that was causing a lot of resentment locally, as you can imagine, if you have your cat eaten. We've also got just one other thing I wanted to point out. Well, I'd like to ask you 3 questions and just say one other particular thing. There is a resident in Chalford Drive who's wanting to make a complaint because her garden is constantly flooded now that the block of flats that you've recently commissioned in Winstone Court, when that came online, so the garden of her and her neighbours is like a bog. So you are investigating it, but she was looking to get that done rather soon, well, quite quickly, because she's losing the summer with her young family and she pays extra for the garden. So if anything can be done to you know, yes, that would really be great. I can give you her details separately, of course. So successful tenancy is something that one of our other providers does. It offers to everybody. It's like help and support to make sure that residents are able to manage their money, you know what's required of them. Is that something that Sanctuary offers as well as a service? I mean, you might call it something different, of course, but do you do something like that?
Yeah, of course, thank you. And obviously our housing officers, when I talk to Ellie, they do the viewings and the sign-ups, and they make sure that they explain and signpost regarding, you know, the sort of resources that are already out there. We are looking shortly to introduce a hardship fund as well. Yeah, and that's in progress at the moment. And the nice thing about that, that's going to empower our housing officers to be able to give on the spot financial assistance to residents. So up until this point, I can tell you from experience of, you know, my team coming back to me and saying, I was in that property and I would have put my hand in my pocket and given them £20 if I could. You know, that's not something they've ever been able to do, but we're going to have a facility for them to be able to give immediate assistance, and actually in a way that's not, they don't have to tick 20 million boxes to sort of qualify for it. It's again a feeling that when, you know, the housing officers have that experience to know that when people require some immediate support, they're in a position and they're empowered to do that. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. And the only other thing I'd like to say is thank you very much to Sanctuary for the very generous support you've given me for my Open Door Cafe that I run every Saturday in Warndon. You are one of the major sponsors of it, have been, and I'll be coming back to you for some more money very soon.
Watch this space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just some etiquette. Just as chair, usually address the chair rather than each other. If you see what I'm saying? It's okay. It's not a problem. Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, I'm one of the city councillors from Claines, and this issue hops back to when I just become a councillor in June 21, and there was a problem with Knoll Court. The elevator broke down, and I was contacted by a concerned resident because her friend was stuck and unable to leave the property, and it was out of action for 12 days. Now, this gentleman is in his 80s. He doesn't have internet access. He has no understanding of internet, and he only had a phone number. I phoned that number for him, and I waited 45 minutes on that to make an inquiry for him. And the staff member immediately thanked me for not shouting at her. So I was a bit concerned about her mental health as well. But my concern is that there was no additional checks, or did seem to be no additional checks with this elevator out of action on residents that may be stuck on higher levels, that nobody seemed to be going around and checking on them. It was a time when the COVID restrictions were still in, so Knoll Court was still locked down, so I couldn't go in, and neither could the lady who was concerned about her friend. So it seemed that although there seems to be many ways of accessing information, a lot of it seems to be web-based, and there are a lot of people who are not on the web for various reasons, and I would like to think that you are aware of these people and that someone will make a special effort to just go in and check. I mean, 12 days in the heat wave for that elevator to be out of action was quite concerning, and I did end up phoning a couple of times, and I contacted some people. I got a good response from yourselves, but it still seemed to me a very, very long time, and I would like to know that sort of thing, if something was to be out of order, like an elevator for that length of time, that somebody would be going in and actually checking on these people. Could I get that sort of reassurance, please?
Yeah, just before you answer that, can I follow that up? Unfortunately, I've got a similar case in my patch. I think yours was Knoll Court, wasn't it, Councillor Lawrence? Mine was in John Gwynn House, and this happened over Christmas. You may be well aware of this, where a resident, unfortunately, had to need the services of an ambulance, and unfortunately the ambulance people got stuck in the lift, and that wasn't being able to resolve, and he wasn't able to get to get the service that he needed in order to rectify his problem. And despite reassurances, nothing happened for a significant period of time, and I had to intervene. Once I did intervene, action did start to happen, and residents were reassured. But it's a little bit of a worrying trend that we do have, where lack of response, certainly in lifts, which the tenants of those properties are obviously of an older generation and need that support, and they're bedridden and they're housebound because as a result of those. And I'm want to also seek assurances that actually your responses regarding lifts is quicker than it is. Appreciate the circumstances will be different in each case, parts availability, engineers, etc., but not dealing with actions as quickly as possible from such a high profile housing supplier who has their base within the city sends the wrong message.
So regarding your issues, I understand obviously during COVID we learned a lot, and you know, one of the things that we have done since then, with lifts being a recurring issue from time to time, and perhaps Steve, you might be able to kind of comment on that side of it shortly, but we have put that scenario as something that is a serious incident now, so it's flagged at our head office, and all the right people are notified, and it's tracked to make sure that, you know, repairs are being done and that the housing team are aware. So where if it's like Knoll Court, we would have a scheme manager in place who can go out and make sure we're making contact with everybody. John Gwynn House, we have our housing officer there. So we do have, to give you that reassurance, we do have a note of all of our residents and any kind of issues and ailments that they have. And actually, Again, it was something that we learned in COVID, we had to support residents at that time. We all had to do things differently, you know, sort of almost out with the normal remit of a housing team. And it was things like going and getting prescriptions for residents and taking them, you know, to make sure that they were, while they were isolating, they were looked after. The lift incident, Steve, you might clarify, some of the lifts are quite old and accessing parts can be quite...
Engineer, and he's got some surveyors that work directly for him. We are doing quite a lot of refurbishments within the Midlands on lifts, so it is something we are investing a lot more money in. Our lift engineer has got his own kind of standardised specification for our lifts, so in the future we will know what all the parts are. We can try and stock some parts, but some of the old lifts that have been installed over the last 20-30 years, it's very hard to have spare parts for each one, but it is something we are investing a lot more money in, is lift refurbishments. Midlands.
Yeah, thank you. But I think the case of John Gwynn House, certainly the one of the blocks, you've got 2 lift shafts, and apparently the lift shaft that was working correctly got shut off, and the one that's incorrectly and it has continuous intermittent problems is the one in actual service. Could you look into that one for us as well, please? Yeah. Councillor Lawrence, is there a follow-up question to you?
My only other comment was, I'm quite pleased to see that we're getting more housing in it's the Arboretum rather, but I was quite disappointed that the housing is framed around vehicle access to those properties. And I would like to see in future, like housing associations, when they get the opportunity, to make them more focused on the community, so there might be a centralised area which is car free, so you can come out of your front door, the kids can be playing and all that, and you can talk to your neighbours and you are not bothered by traffic and road noise. That's around the back as a sort of service access maybe, because people do want their vehicles, but it would be quite nice if you could reintroduce some sort of village greeny sort of effect if you get that opportunity. Perhaps with the sustainability as well, you can make that a community garden that people are coming out and facing each other, rather than people coming, you know, kids coming out their front door and don't get run over. It would be so much nicer to see that sort of build idea. Thank you.
Councillor Petrowski.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's only a brief question, and you will be relieved. It's nothing to do with any casework. So from my patch. So my question is about to Rebecca, actually, if I may. What role do you, as an organisation, so a significant employer in the city, and cards on the table, I work for social housing as well, much smaller nationally, quite bigger locally. What role do you play in this council's aspiration to deliver net zero by 2030? If you can give us some sort of concrete examples of this. And I would be interested in something quite specific, in the sense that, well, two things actually, sort of trying to sort of address both the environmental sort of aspect, climate change emergency, and the aspect of poverty, basically, within your customer base, and retrofits come to mind with that. And a very, very quick, if I may, just a query about the environmental management system. Is it something that this council is part of, or not? Because it sounds really, really interesting, and I was just wondering whether we can hear a little bit more about it. It's the energy efficiency of the office buildings.
Yes. So shall I start with that?
Please, thank you.
So we are at a relatively early stage in our development of an EMS. We have been working really closely with the university's sustainability team, as they have enacted an eco-campus model. And we're now working with them and a consultancy about how we can further adapt that model to what is not really a campus, but is our sort of office campus base, so an eco-housing model. So where we are with it is, like I said, very early stages. We're looking to move towards accreditation towards the end of this financial year, but that will be for our facilities offices. So like I said, 18 across the country, where we will be able to have much better control and data coming in about how we're using energy in those areas. I don't think we are currently working with the council on that, but I'm very happy to have a meeting if you were doing something similar. I've not been in post very long, so I've not had a chance to meet any of you before tonight. So very happy to have further conversations if that's something that would be of interest. And then on to where we are in supporting your mission to get to net zero by 2030. So our goals are slightly less ambitious, unfortunately. We're aiming for net zero by 2050, and that is partly because of the large amount of stock that we have. You've mentioned retrofit. Obviously, that is a huge contributor in terms of our carbon emissions. We are going to publish our sustainability report, like I said, in the next 6 weeks or so. That will be followed by a more quantitative environmental and climate change strategy, which will come out probably towards the end of this year, which will look at how we are plotting or charting that path to decarbonisation. So we're looking to halve our operational emissions by 2030. And we'll be able to give a sort of a more concrete route towards that. In terms of how we can support you, again, very much welcome a meeting to understand more about your plan to get there by 2030. I think retrofit is probably the key one. Obviously, we don't have as much stock in Worcester as other providers do. But as I said, we have a list of our properties here. We know where they are. We're very much sort of working towards that 2030 deadline. We've focused more heavily on areas where we have substantial stock just because of the efficiencies. I'm sure you're aware how difficult it is procuring contractors at the moment. So by taking that approach, we're able to sort of deliver more consistently. But that doesn't mean we're not focusing on Worcester. It's just slightly later down in the plan. Obviously, the retrofit works deliver carbon benefits, but also from an energy efficiency perspective, we expect them to support or reduce fuel poverty caused by low energy efficiency. Obviously, it's difficult with where energy prices are at the moment to guarantee that that will result in lower bills, but we expect it to support residents and sort of staying warm and having affordable bills. Beyond that, like I said, I'm standing in for the social side. That's not my responsibility in Sanctuary at the moment, but more than happy to feedback any specifics you have on what else we're doing to support on property or community investment. And Marie-Claire did specifically say she's very happy to have meetings. I know she works with some of you quite closely. Is there anything else more detail-wise?
No, this is sorry. Yes, this is plenty in terms of the detail. I'm very grateful, and if I may only say just one thing to Chair, if I was nodding frantically when Rebecca was saying that they are willing to have a conversation with us, but could I please ask the Chair and the Director present here to explore this environmental management system to see through the appropriate committee whether this is something we could.
Yeah, Chair's probably better with Kevin Moore as head of property or the environment sustainability team. But I'll certainly take the offer back, and we'll make sure that we hook up the relevant officers to have a conversation.
Councillor Hodgson.
Yes, I've got a very simple question, really. I represent a part of Worcester that doesn't have any sanctuary housing, so I'm not going to ask a question physically about that. It's really about sanctuaries actually involvement in Worcester City as a whole, because I think it's really good for the city that we have this major employer based in Worcester and that, and obviously for our economy, you know, jobs and that are quite important, and actually you are a major employer in the city when we've lost so many good ones in the last few years. How many people do you employ in Worcester, and how many vacancies are currently available you've got in Worcester, and what people do you recruit who actually live in and around the city of Worcester? And that's particularly important for sort of more senior jobs, because generally speaking, people in more senior jobs generally come from further afield. Like I work for a company and their head office is in Bracknell in Berkshire.
Okay, so we've got over 1,100 staff based in Worcester in terms of employees. In terms of the number of vacancies, that is something I would need to take away and feedback. But just to give you a flavour of who works in Worcester for us, obviously we have people in Yvonne's team and Steve's team from an operational perspective, housing, officers, surveyors. We also have the staff in our care homes. In terms of our sort of corporate offices that are based on Castle Street, that is our national base for all of our administrative governance functions. So our chief exec, our entire group exec are based in Worcester. Our finance function, our HR function, our ever expanding IS function and all the new technology they're bringing forward. All of those services that service the entire group, so 105,000 homes, all the care homes, that's all based centrally in Worcester. So we do have that range of, obviously we support people coming in on their business administration apprenticeship at a very, very entry level, right through to our chief exec is based here. So we have a lot of senior staff, we have a lot of junior staff and everything in between. In terms of where staff live, again, I could probably get some specific data on that, but knowing I'm based here in Worcester, I live in Worcester, a lot of our colleagues do live in Worcester. Some do travel from surrounding villages within Worcestershire. We do have people who live Birmingham, where you might come by train. Post-COVID world, we do work hybrid home and office working. So most staff do sort of 3 days in the office, a couple of days at home. But yes, we do have a lot of staff. I mean, if you've ever tried to walk along Worcester High Street at lunchtime, you'll see the staff with the lanyards out supporting the local economy by way of all our coffee shops and cafes. So yes, I do think we see it as quite an important role for us, that we are supporting the local economy in that sense. And I think it was apparent when we weren't working in the office over the COVID lockdowns, it was noticeably quieter without that 12:30 rush out the door for lunch. So yes, I will get some answers on the specifics for you and I'll feed that back through to you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. It is a quick one, I promise. It's a classic, more of a comment than a question, and it's actually more for the officers than Sanctuary, and I'm going to be very mindful of what I say because I wear two hats. But I feel this is worth mentioning. One way of compelling external organisations to be more ambitious in terms of net zero is to require them to demonstrate the measures they'll take to cut carbon emissions if they're to win contracts to provide services for Worcester. So we can set the terms. And in the 8 months that I've been part of the organisation, I've seen myself that some councils are effectively forcing organisations to be more ambitious in terms of sustainability by setting stringent carbon emission targets when they put services out to tender. Some councils have really latched on to sustainability, and it's not just lip service, they are making it very onerous for companies to win contracts. Other councils, in my limited experience, sustainability seems like it's an afterthought. I know it's not the case with Sanctuary, but I hope that one day our carbon emission targets are going to align, not just Sanctuary, but all companies, because we cannot wait till 2050.
Yeah, so
comment more than the question, I apologise.
I'll ask the question then. In terms of that, in terms of your commitment to biodiversity net gain, currently regulations say 10%. What's the average net gain on Sanctuary sites? And are you committed to providing biodiversity net gain on site rather than off site?
I'm going to press the button, but I think that's actually one for development more than it is for me. Sorry, Sophie.
It's okay. We'll do whatever you tell us, Rebecca. We do have, so that is something we are looking at, and it is on-site delivery. So, for example, with the Sanson Walk scheme that we know is coming forward, all our biodiversity measures are based around site there. Everything we're on site with, it's not something we look to just do elsewhere. We integrate it as part of the development that we're bringing forward.
Okay. And are you committed to a higher number than 10%?
I will have to get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks. Do we have any other speakers? I've got a couple of questions before I can sum up, if that's okay. Just in terms of, appreciate that you haven't got much housing stock within Worcester, but I've always been thinking for such a large employer like yourselves here, bringing people to the city, you'd always want to show your guests around a landmark building or a significant project within the city to just show, you know, this is what we're about, you've come here. Is there anything in the pipeline that you are working on or would like to work on, or we can help with to help that realization for the city become a reality?
Yeah, I think at the moment what we do showcase when we bring people to Worcester is our Sanctuary Grove development, which is in St John's on Bromyard Road, which is care, extra care, supported living, retirement living, all on one campus, with a community hub that serves all the residents there. It doesn't contain any general needs housing as such. There's sort of some general needs over 55s accommodation. It is geared more to support and care. But we do see that as a flagship development. It's the first time that we did that sort of multi-use scheme anywhere in the country with all those operations together. So we do use that as a demonstration of what we're delivering. We would also like, when the Sansom Walk scheme comes forward, to use that because it ticks boxes for ourselves as our in-house contractor delivering it using modern methods of construction. There's the sustainability aspects to it. We will be using our standard house types fully across the site, which is one of the first schemes we'll have, and certainly the first scheme we'll have locally in the Midlands that will utilise those house types fully to be able to demonstrate the level of specification that we offer to our residents and the inclusion by design aspects. So yeah, that's sort of the next project that we see coming forward that we'll use for that purpose. It is 5 minutes from our office as well, so from a extra tick point we can walk people there, which is a bonus.
Okay, and you mentioned on one of your slides regarding 1.5 million into local communities with a top up of I think 2.6 million. Can you kind of break down into detail how much of that has been spent within Worcester?
I think off my head, 1,700, but that's not in the last financial year. So I can check that exactly. Sorry, I'm not very good at pressing the button. I can get back to you on exactly how much has gone. I think Marie-Claire shared a document in advance. Tom, I'm not sure if that came to you, that had a breakdown of where we have been working and the rough amounts that have been invested into each of those organisations. Happy to resend that or to check more specifically if you're interested in the total amount in Worcester in last financial year. That's no problem.
Just to say that document's going to be circulated post-meeting, I think. You've got it, haven't you? Yeah.
It's fine. And is it also possible to share a contact details of key personnel within where you have got property, so we are able to get through to the right people? A lot of the time, I think councillors find it frustrating having to go through the switchboard element of it, and in the hope that we get put through to the right person in terms of that. And clearly, you've been working with some of our colleagues in local areas to a good effect, and we want to develop those relationships. And I think the summing up message is, you know, you're a key employer within the city. We'd like you to do more. We'd like to develop and maintain those relationships. Obviously, there are teething issues, as with any housing organisation. We'd like to get those addressed, but overall, this process is about what you've demonstrated in terms of understanding where you are, where you wish to go to, and exploring any opportunities that we may have in future to work and strengthen that relationship. Appreciate your time this evening. I know it's late, but thank you for coming. Okay, we'll have agenda item 7 then, provision of a new artificial grass pitch at Purdyswell. I believe, Lloyd, you're taking this?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. And Chair, Alan New is here as well, who's put a tremendous amount of work into this and who will come on after me to fill in any gaps. So in January 2020, this committee approved the Worcester City Local Football Foundation plan. And that plan identified small-sided playing pitches and artificial grass pitch provision as a priority for football development in the city. It further identified Purdyswell as a priority location for that activity. A lack of such provision is also highlighted within the playing pitch and outdoor sports strategy, which forms part of the South Worcestershire Development Plan. So the proposal we're talking about tonight has been prioritised by a number of organisations in a number of different places. We also know, as providers of existing artificial pitches, that there is currently under provision in the city, which Alan will touch on a little later. And we know that we're having to turn away teams of both junior and adult ages, who are then having to travel outside of Worcester to find such provision. It's also highly unusual nowadays to find that a flagship public leisure facility doesn't have a full-sided artificial pitch provision. Most types of centres you will go to will have that provision. We don't in Worcester currently. In June of last year, this committee formally approved the progression of a business case for the facility we're going to talk about this evening, and recommended a council an in-principle capital allocation of £200,000 as match funding towards a Football Foundation grant. Council duly approved that capital allocation in July of last year. Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 of the report provide you with an indicative location for where the facility would be sited and what it would look like. And just to reassure members, this isn't a football stadium. The facility doesn't have any seating, whether that be covered or otherwise. This is an artificial grass pitch surrounded by galvanised fencing that would benefit from floodlights. We've had some initial conversations with planning colleagues about such a facility, and they've not raised any particular concerns, with the caveat that obviously this would require a full planning application to be submitted and considered. So we've been talking to the Football Foundation for many months, and they've made it really clear to us that Purdyswell is a high priority site for them. And it's now likely to attract up to 75% capital funding. That level of capital funding has not been offered to this date from the Football Foundation. And this does seem a bit of a once in a lifetime opportunity that we should pursue. So with capital costs of the scheme likely to be 800,000, the grant would cover off 600,000 of that, with the council's contribution being 200,000. And based on that £200,000 capital contribution being repaid back over the 10-year life of the playing surface, the business case focuses on the cost of the upkeep, repair, future replacement versus the income the facility is able to generate. And again, Alan will talk to us about the sort of the lettable nature of the space and how we balance that off with free use and community use as well. So with the forecast income likely to be generated through the facility being £100,000 and the total costs being just shy of that, in effect, the income will cover the costs of maintenance, upkeep, future replacement, and obviously the repayment costs of the council as well. There was a question asked in the week around the financial impact of this on the council. Given that the income that will be driven through the facility will pay for the full repayment costs, that won't add to the revenue pressure the council currently faces. That will be dealt with through the new income stream. Just a couple of points to mention around Purdyswell. It is currently a public open space, and therefore there will need to be a statutory consultation process if we are to move forward. That involves us putting 2 adverts in a local newspaper 1 week after another, and I'll come on to that in the recommendation in a moment. And obviously councillors who've been here longer than others will remember the council motion in respect to Purdyswell that was approved some years ago, and therefore any change of use to Purdyswell needs to be approved by council. And so, subject to approval of this report this evening, we would look to take a report to council in July seeking that permission, and that would include any feedback gathered through the public open space statutory consultation as well. Throughout the course of this week, there's been some helpful questions asked by councillors, and Alan very quickly put together a supplementary report which was published on Monday, and I'll ask Alan to cover off some of those concerns when he talks. One of the questions was around biodiversity net gain. And I think what I can certainly assure members of this evening is whether or not we are committed to provide that 10% net gain or not via planning. We are committed to doing it. And Alan is meeting with operational colleagues in the next few weeks to talk about what a biodiversity scheme would look like that we could build in around the site. And finally, members will, I'm sure, be conscious of the significant positive impact of such a facility, which will have for Worcester residents. Additional high-quality sports pitch provision, additional leisure and physical activity opportunity, promotion of health and well-being, social interaction opportunity, improving the offer at our flagship leisure centre, and as I say, saving residents, clubs and organisations money by not having to travel outside of the city to use such a facility. So as with reports linked to developments, the recommendations can be slightly lengthy and complicated. So we have a number. First, we're seeking members to approve the business case set out within the report this evening, and in doing so, approve the release of the in-principle capital allocation of £200,000. We're then asking members to approve officers to get on and commence the statutory consultation for the disposal of public open space. And then to note that a further report will be presented to Council in July, seeking Council's approval for use of that location at Purd as well, for the development of this facility. And then finally, we're seeking delegated authority to relevant directors with the chair and vice chair of this committee to firstly submit a planning application for the development, and then secondly, subject to planning permission being approved and award of the grant being approved, to formalise any final arrangements around operation, grant funding, and the construction contract. So I think I'll stop there, Chair, conscious of time, and ask Alan just to cover off the subsequent report that's been published this week and anything that I've missed.
Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've had a conversation with the Football Foundation technical advisors in the last few days, and they have confirmed that from an environmental perspective that none of the materials involved in the product go to landfill, that both the actual playing surface itself and the infill materials that are used are recyclable and can be repurposed as well. So from that perspective, nothing does go to landfill. However, I think there is recognition from all of the partners involved that there are further developments to be made in terms of the performance infills that are currently used. So one of the challenges that's faced at the moment is that the surface is as close to replicating a grass surface as possible. So there are certain performance measures which are in place. So whether that's ball bounce, ball roll, friction, those type of measures are in place. So the current infill products are very good at meeting those criteria. And some of the other alternatives at the moment that are under development haven't kind of quite met that standard at this point. However, the Football Foundation and the range of partners that they work with, including Sport England, are very, very keen to continue to develop those kind of aspects and look at what alternatives are available. And the Football Foundation themselves have recently just opened a new test hub just north of Sheffield, where they've laid a number of different surfaces, and they are now going to test various combinations of pitch surfaces and infill over a period of time, because of course one of the biggest challenges with this is knowing whether the material that you use is sustainable over the length of the product. And normally an artificial grass pitch would have a lifespan of in the region of 10 years. So that testing program will need to take place over a fairly sustained period to make sure that it is sustainable in the long term. So from where we're at the moment, the Football Foundation have closed their current funding pipeline because they've got a significant number of projects on that pipeline at the moment that they now want to focus on delivery. So they won't be taking on any more projects at the moment until such time as those projects have been delivered. And as Lloyd alluded to earlier, they were founded in 2000 and previously would only give grants of up to 50%. And in the current 3-year funding cycle they're in, they're actually granting allocations of up to 75% of the funding of projects. So we're in an ideal opportunity here to take advantage of that chance. I would also just kind of, I guess, fill in some background on Purdeswell as a site. Traditionally, we've had grass football pitches on Purdeswell for many years, but back in 2006, the Football Foundation actually allocated a grant to the City Council for the building of what is the Football Foundation changing block at the site. So it forms the far end of the current leisure centre building. And that was a significant investment. The challenge that came with that was that it serves the grass pitches. And of course, grass football pitches have a tendency to be used primarily at weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, and also they're not floodlit. So in the winter months, you're actually quite limited to the amount of time you can use those facilities. Of course, the benefit with the artificial grass pitch facility is that it is floodlit and therefore it allows usage 7 days a week, all evening, and then it actually takes advantage of those additional facilities that we've got on site as well. So the vision's always been to develop Purdeswell into the football hub in the city, really. So we've got the grass football pitches, which were refurbished back in 2017. Now, when they were first installed, they were of a very good standard. Unfortunately, the course of the pandemic has not helped with them being maintained to the original standard. However, part of this project isn't just about the installation of an artificial grass pitch. It goes beyond that. It's also an opportunity to gain funding to bring all of those grass pitches. There's currently 6 grass pitches on the site. And it's also an opportunity to bring those 6 grass pitches back up to a really good standard as well, because the Football Foundation's primary focus is on grassroots football and in encouraging as many young people, boys, girls, whatever groups, to take up the sport and sustain playing the sport over a long period of time. So it will enable us not just to put the full-sized artificial grass pitch in, it will also enable us to do work on improving the quality of the grass pitches, whilst also on the site you've got the existing infrastructure which allows those users to come and use it. So you've got your changing facilities, you've got your car parking, you've got your cafe facilities, so it's an ideal location for this investment. Chair.
Thank you, Lloyd, and thank you, Alan, and thank you for your dedication to the project and the amount of work that you've put in. It's quite evident that you've thought long and hard about the consequences and taken members' feedbacks prior to this meeting on board and investigated those. I'll open it up to the floor now. I think we've got Councillor Hodgson first, Councillor Cooper, and then Councillor Lawrenson, and Councillor Petrowski.
Okay, yeah, just opening of this. I noticed the dimensions of the pitches are almost the minimum they have to be. So we're not sort of, going for something that's very, very elaborate as well. I also take as well with modern floodlight, these will be LED ones, which therefore far more energy efficient and don't have the same light spill, which is obviously something that would affect local residents and also, of course, the local wildlife in that particular area as well. I'm also encouraged what you say about the other pictures on there, the grass pictures, because I know some work was done a few years ago and they fell well below standard, and there was a lot of criticism from the, if you like, the local football community, sport is actually very, very important. I can remember when Lucy was mayor, when those pictures were originally developed, there was a big youth football festival on those pictures, and as a consort and mayor, we were introduced to facility by Andy Stinton, who was an England player from the 1980s. And we also had the pleasure of meeting Jeff Hurst and the late Ray Wilkins. And it was a really memorable afternoon. And I think, you know, the important thing about the facilities as well, I would also ask as well, make sure that the facilities are available for women and girls soccer as well. I think there's a lot more of that now, and possibly think about making one of the dressing rooms a female sort of orientated dressing room for actually female players. I think that would also help. But I mean, yeah, I'm going to support this when it comes to a vote.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Yes, everything that you mentioned there, you're correct in the statement that you made. From the point of view of the proposed programme of use, in terms of the business case, the reason that the net surplus on the bottom line is fairly minimal is because from the Football Foundation's point of view, this isn't a commercial operation. This is just a project which is designed to provide grassroots facilities and encourage participation. So it's not, you know, an income generating scheme in that respect. However, the reason that we've kept the net surplus fairly low is that that's enabled us through the proposed fees and charges, which obviously again are yet to be approved, but by keeping the prices as low as possible and very competitive in the local area, and also by building some free use and some subsidised use into the programme, which will be delivered through the Freedom Leisure Healthy Communities team. That again has kind of obviously meant that we've set the income target at 100,000. Now, that target is very much based on local data. The current small 3G pitches at St John's Sports Centre over the course of the last 2 years have generated in the region of about £90,000 to £95,000 worth of income. And this facility obviously has far more potential than that does. But we've had conversations locally with Claines Lane and the new facility that went in there in recent times. The university are just in the process of getting to the stage of opening their second 3G pitch on the university site. And one of the things that we're looking to develop through this project is to bring together a collaborative group which will meet on a quarterly basis, which means that these types of pitches in the city aren't delivered just in isolation, that you've got a core group of stakeholders that meet on a regular basis to ensure that all of the needs of the city are met and all of the local teams' needs are met in those areas. So from the point of view of the balance of the programme, we've had a number of meetings with Nicole Allison, who's the Chief Executive from Worcester City Women's Football Team. They've got some really exciting plans about the girls and women's game in terms of their development plans in the next few years. They currently play in level 5 and have been fighting for promotion this season. If they can get into level 4, then that gives them an opportunity then to host a talent centre at the site. So we've provisionally at the moment, we're looking at a regular night where emerging talent within a 45-minute drive time of the facility will be able to come into that site and use it and really kind of help to drive the girls' game locally. We're also working with Warndon Villages, who again are looking to increase the number of girls' teams they've got. And again, they are going to work in conjunction with Worcester City Women so that their sessions, when the girls get to that older age group, at the moment there's a bit of a void. So when they reach the age of about 16, there's no signpost, they have nowhere to go. And quite often at that age, they're vulnerable to just dropping off and losing interest in the game. And Nicole's really, really passionate and really keen, as I am, to make sure that we create that bridge from the girls' game into the women's game, and therefore it's something that they continue to do throughout their lifetime, not something that they just drop off as you know, in their teen years.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. It's really positive hearing what you were saying about women and girls football, and I'd like to thank the officers for a detailed report. One thing to note and one question, please. I've seen firsthand the microplastics that go on the kits if they've been diving and rolling around with things, which end up in washing machines and end up in our rivers and seas, which is of concern to me. However, I do note that Sport England and the DCMS don't have another solution at the moment. I know the EU are looking at potentially banning these, but it's not there yet. So that's something to think about. My question is surrounding around cycle parking and car parking. Anyone that's driven anywhere near Perth as well on a Saturday or Sunday will see cars just littered everywhere. These are people that are active people that could potentially cycle to matches, warm up on the way there, get their bodies moving. I would like to know what your plan is for that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, certainly from the point of view of the current situation with regards to the infill products, the EU are at the moment suggesting a 6-year transition period before any action is taken. So essentially where that would place us would be about halfway through the lifespan of the surface. But I think this is a really exciting opportunity for us to get involved with the Football Foundation, Sport England and that, and kind of drive these changes that are inevitably going to come. Because if there is a transitional period, during that transitional period, particularly given that, you know, it may be 5-6 years or more, then clearly new products are going to come to the market. And I touched on the testing hub up in Sheffield earlier. So clearly some of those products are going to be able to be tested over a long period of time during that stage. So we're going to get to a point where we're going to come up with alternatives to the rubber crumb infill that we currently use that still give us the performance criteria that will allow us to host matches on there. And that's one of the keys also, is that by meeting the criteria, it allows matches to be played on that surface, not just training, but actual proper match fixtures, which then reduces the demand on the grass pitches, which means that we can protect their longer term future as well. So from that point of view, I think it's a real positive that we can kind of get involved and influence it. And we're working very closely with the Football Foundation. We first started working with them back in 2019, actually on this project. And then unfortunately the pandemic brought everything to a crashing halt. But we've got some really good relationships there. And I know from the conversations I've had just this week that they are really, really keen to work with us and making sure that, you know, that we can kind of drive those changes so that we all ultimately get to where we want to be with it. And I take on board the challenge with the removal at the moment of some of the products from the surface. And we will do everything within our powers to make sure that we've got all of the equipment on the site to try and prevent that. And I think it is something that we need to do more work with the clubs on. You know, it's just really simple things, like if the players, as they come off the pitch, were to take their trainers off, you'd be surprised how much of that infill would be retained within the playing area then, rather than carried into the home. So I think, you know, just some simple tasks that we work with our local clubs on could make a real difference. Sorry, what was the second part of the car parking? Yeah, the infrastructure, sorry. Yeah, I mean, with that one, we're just, again, we've got about 400 parking spaces on the site, but we're really kind of keen to work with the active travel officer and the sustainability officers to really kind of encourage that, particularly, you know, when you look at routes like the canal side and things like that you've got in the summer months, that we could really kind of utilise it as a corridor really up to that site. So yeah, we're really kind of keen to focus on working with the active travel officer, particularly on how we address those challenges. Thanks.
Is that okay, Karen? Hannah? Yeah, fine. I was going to say, in terms of obviously the crumb staying or remaining on site as much as possible, whether you know, one of the easy solutions is being able to wash your boots by the side of the pitch, or a dip in, dip out kind of mechanism where it doesn't, you know, cause a queue or anything like that, so people can quickly just move on.
Yeah, you're right, Chair. I think at the moment the provision tends to be more kind of boot cleaners, but I would question just how proactively they are used, and I think that's, as I say, something that we need to build into the booking arrangements with the clubs and through our leisure provider, make sure that we are monitoring and checking on. And I know from the conversations with their area manager that from, you know, again, from an environmental perspective, they're really kind of keen to make sure that they deliver on those promises as well.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alan, for, I know you spent hundreds of hours on this, and then we asked you to do an extra supplementary report in response to our concerns about the environmental impact. Not only did you answer them, but you answered them really thoroughly. So thank you very much for that. I've got two questions. You've given an assurance that all of the contractors that we've spoken with up until now are able to recycle the material instead of sending it to landfill. First question is, has the cost of recycling those materials been included in the maintenance? And the second question relates to the end of page 16 in the original report. It says that in terms of savings, the new artificial pitch would produce a reduction in mileage of 146,000 miles, which would equate to 2% of the council's carbon footprint. How on earth has that been worked out? So recycling materials, has the cost been factored in, and 2% reduction in carbon footprint because of this pitch? I'm interested.
Sorry, yeah. In terms of the recycling costs, we've built in a sinking fund of 25,000 within the business plan so that that surface can be replaced and redone after about 10 years. And within that, there's an allocation within that for recycling the materials at that time. In terms of the calculation, I spoke to the active travel officer and also a sustainability manager, and we ran that through two separate models to come up with that facility there, with that calculation. So, I mean, I can go back and get some more specific detail for you, Neil, if you'd like me to do that, but.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I mean, this is something that I asked the officers to do in terms of to calculate that, and that was on the premise of a number of clubs currently operating from different sites around the city. Some up at Six Ways, some up in St John, some just outside, you know, in some of the villages, who would then proactively be using that. So it's the number of journeys that users of this facility that were going outside would be then deferred back into, and I think that's the rough basis of the calculation, isn't it, amongst other things?
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, because at the moment within the project, every time a project like this gets delivered, you have to be in partnership with a partner club, and therefore the club that we're looking to partner with at the moment currently use 6 venues for their training demand. So they play all of their match fixtures on the grass pitches at Purd as well, but they haven't got the training facilities. So they currently travel to 6 various venues, 3 of which are in the city and 3 of which are outside of the city. So travelling out to Pershore, Malvern and Droitwich is where the vast majority of that mileage comes from. But it is quite conservative as well, because it assumes that the journeys within the city are not necessarily close to the actual location. They can come from the outskirts, so it's a conservative estimate as well.
Yeah, but just because I love stats, like to know the breakdown of, you know, how we figured it out, and I think it relates to what Councillor Cooper said about active travel. I mean, we're due to talk about an active travel plan. I mean, surely that's going to link in with the artificial pitch, assuming that council agrees it next month. So. Yes, I would appreciate more stats, and I'd like to think that this discussion will relate to the active travel plan that we're going to discuss here, appreciating that a lot of this comes under the remit of the county council, and I just can totally anticipate the discussion that we'll have, which is active travel is amazing, but we need a county council that believes in it. But we'll make those political points on the night.
Thank you. Councillor Pszczalski.
Thank you very much, Chair. Alan, this is in many, many ways a model way of tackling this, such a complicated project. And I really appreciate your hard work. I remember talking about it last year in my first communities committee meeting chaired by Councillor Rias and saying that as a keen footballer, not the quickest, but sort of refined back in the day, I would really welcome this. I read with interest your report on the environmental impact, and I suppose just a quick point to state and to say on the record, it looks like the European standards when it comes to environmental protections are still for us to match. Sadly, we are not bound by them. So Brexit does matter on the local level, on the record. However, we can talk about other aspects, water pollutions and things. However, the main thing, there was lots and lots of questions which I asked prior to today's committee meeting and also in the recess, and I'm very grateful for clarifications. I'm reassured, and I feel for you and for other people's worrying about microplastics, the infill stuff that goes in there and ends up in football boots, and we then bring it up. I mean, it's this bit here in 3.6 that says this stuff can be harmful. It is harmful. It gives us cancer. It's in our food chain. So it is what it is. It's not an ideal situation, but I'm reassured, and I'm really encouraged by the fact that I don't know what it's going to look like, whether we're going to hoover people coming out of this thing or what. But can I please ask for absolutely super focus on this, because it's important, and it has an impact on health and well-being as well. It's, as I said, this stuff is evil, and it's in our food chain and stuff. All the other aspects, the benefits, and I wish there was more football played in Battenhall, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, once again, thank you, and I urge you to keep an eye on the evil mini stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I am very concerned about microplastics. It's something I spend my life avoiding, single-use plastics, and I wouldn't buy something that contains that. So I am very concerned, and I would please ask that we are looking to actively be a council that is an early adopter of better surfaces. My problem, well, my concern is how much of does this covering of a surface with a blanket of an artificial surface, how much does it stop the biodiversity underneath? Does it affect worm growth and all that sort of thing? Do we still have insect life under this, or are we making a desert? That would be my concern.
Well, I'm happy to give a non-professional view in it. I may bow to experts on the left of me. I don't think much will survive under the facility. But what we will make sure is that whether or not biodiversity net gain is caught by planning or not, we will ensure that we increase by at least 10% the biodiversity in that area net. So like I say, Alan will be talking to colleagues from environmental operations over the next few weeks, and we know Perth as well is a natural area for us anyway. So many people would say, well, what else can you do? But we'll ensure that whether that's, through wildflower meadow, through bushes, through small trees, that we will look to do what we can to minimise any loss and grow it basically.
Yeah, I'm aware it's quite a small patch, but how many small patches does it take to start becoming a big impact? The only thing, am I right in thinking that this surface as it is, and it stops tyres themselves going into landfill in the first place? So we are actually stopping landfill to make this surface.
Yeah, again, sorry, I'm talking for you. When questions were helpfully asked this week, and we started doing a bit of reading around this, then yes, this is a source of upcycling, recycling, whichever you want to call it, for tyres.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers on the item? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. thank you, Lloyd. Really encouraged by the 10% increase, but I think that needs to be in writing somewhere. I appreciate it's on the recording and the public can see it, but it's a really positive, bold thing to say. Look forward to seeing it happen. Is it going to be in the writing, the report for full council next month? Because I don't think it will particularly influence any of the councillors at that meeting. I think people will know before they walk into the meeting, to be honest, but I still think to have that in writing as a pledge is really important, and it reiterates the council's commitment to biodiversity. So thank you, Lloyd. Great to hear, but I think it needs to be on record.
Lloyd, I'll let you answer that.
Chair, it wouldn't necessarily be in the council report for next week, but I'm sure we can find a way. But if there's a written minute of it made clearly this evening as well, then we can refer that back through the system.
I mean, I know it's a question I asked officers specifically regarding this. Would the appropriate measure then be that I propose it and my vice chair seconds it and we get it as an amendment in the recommendations?
If that gives you the most reassurance, then absolutely, that's absolutely fine.
Okay. Are we happy with that then? That we stick in a clause in 1.7 that to ensure that the council keeps its commitment to achieving a 10% biodiversity net gain on site. So I'll propose that, and Councillor Lawrenson second it. Are we all in favour of that? Fine, thank you. If that's okay, if there's no more speakers, then are we okay to take the recommendations on block? We happy with that? Yeah. So all those in favour, recommendations 1.1 to 1.7. Agreed?
Yes, that's carried, Chair.
And are there any abstentions? One abstention. Nobody's any against? No. Thank you. Can I thank Alan and officers as again, it's been a significant piece of work, and it's you know, by no means is this rubber stamped. There are several other committees that this has to go through, including obviously full council, where it will be debated in terms of the green space motion that was posed at PERD as well, and it will be debated there as well. So thank you. Right, we have agenda item 8, annual homelessness and rough sleepers update. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it brief, and what I won't do is to go through the full appendix, which contains all the detail of the actual homelessness and rough sleeper report. And what I've tried to do within the covering report is just to draw out some of the key priority areas or areas of particular interest, which I thought the committee may wish to hear a little bit more about. I bring this report, it first came to committee in July last year. It's the first time that we've done an annual homelessness and rough sleeper update report. And the intention really is to inform the committee around the activities surrounding homelessness and rough sleeping in the city. It's not a statutory requirement of the authority, but hopefully it helps to inform members of this committee around that activity that's being undertaken. Since last year, we've adopted a new homelessness and rough sleeper strategy that was adopted by council in February this year. And although I've drawn reference to that within the report and have attached an update of the action plan that was agreed at council as Appendix 1, at this point, this report doesn't provide great detail around where we're at in terms of delivery of the homelessness and rough sleeper strategy. However, in future years, that will be a lot more detailed within the annual update. Just by way of providing a few headlines really around the service demand that we faced over the past 12 months, I think what's clear is that it's been a very challenging year, and we've had significant demands on the homelessness service, both in terms of numbers, but also complexity of cases that are presented to us. And I'm sure members have come across many cases through their casework where they may see some of those challenges and complexities. We've had an increase in homelessness approaches in the past 12 months from the previous year. We've had 131 more, so that's a total of 2,002, and that's led to an increase of homeless applications being taken, an additional 78 on the previous year. We've had an increase in prevention duties accepted, but less relief duties over the course of the 12 months. We've continued to see the trend of the largest cause of homelessness being family being unable or unwilling to accommodate. So what we saw during the pandemic was a significant shift of the biggest cause of homelessness being around the end of assured short-hold tenancies, largely due to the interventions around preventing private landlords from issuing notices on tenants. And we haven't yet seen that fully recover to as the greatest cause of homelessness, though that has risen significantly over the past 12 months from previous years, and may well be moving in that trajectory moving forward. We do still see significant numbers of people presenting as homeless as a result of domestic abuse, so that is still a concern. But I think some of that is around better reporting, better recording around, and better capturing the true picture of the demand around that particular cause of homelessness. Rough sleeping is one of the most visible sides of homelessness, though in actual fact is probably a very small proportion of what we see and what we consider around homelessness within the city. Though often people associate rough sleeping as the sort of primary cause of homelessness. At any one point, we tend to have between 4 and 6 individuals that are more entrenched rough sleepers, but we do see spikes in numbers throughout the year, and a lot of that is around people either passing through Worcester or spending short periods of time or falling out of accommodation. We've got very good processes in place for outreach services to ensure that we engage with anybody that we identify as rough sleeping, and that's a real testament to the partnership that we have in place within the city. Rough sleeping in particular does have significant challenges. Often the individuals involved have additional and multiple complex needs, so it does require quite significant and intensive engagement to work with those to provide the necessary support, and often requires quite significant flexibility around the approach that we take. But we try and be creative and innovative as possible in responding to their individual needs. We manage a number of units of temporary accommodation, so where people are unfortunately made homeless. We do have a reliance on temporary accommodation, but that still doesn't meet the needs of people presenting as homeless. It's a key priority area for us, so we've been doing a significant amount of work on identifying the true need, the future need, and looking at options to bring additional units of suitable, high-quality temporary accommodation on board to reduce the reliance on bed and breakfast and hotel accommodation, particularly for households that have children. The number of households in temporary accommodation at the end of the past financial year did rise from the previous year, and the main cause of that primarily is around the availability of affordable housing to move people into. So it's part of the system impact ultimately. So the availability of safe and sustainable accommodation is probably one of our largest challenges in responding to homelessness. Demand is significantly greater than supply, and Worcester in particular faces probably one of the greatest challenges in that respect across the county. We have just over 3,000 applicants on the housing register, and that's an additional 719 from the same date the previous year, so that the numbers have risen dramatically over the past 12 months. In line with that, we've had 363 properties allocated. So by way of sort of comparing the need versus the supply of accommodation, it's clearly sort of significantly imbalanced, and it's fewer than we had in the previous year. So not only has the demand for social housing risen, the availability has dropped. And just by way of context, we've have for some of our larger needs accommodations, so particularly around family-sized accommodation, we allocated 49 three-bedroom houses and 3 four-bedroom houses over the course of the year, but we have a demand currently on the housing register for 668 households that need a 3-bedroom or more or larger property. So again, a significant amount of those individuals are competing for a very small number of properties. There's detail in the report around the proposed allocation of our homeless prevention grant, which is one of our sort of core areas of grant funding to respond to homelessness and rough sleeping. What's detailed within the appendix of the more detailed report sort of outlines that grant funding has significantly reduced to the authority by way of comparison to the previous year. So the total grant funding surrounding homelessness in 21-22 was £2.3 million, and that dropped in the past year to 1.3 million. So almost halved over the course of, by way of comparison to the previous year, a lot of which surrounded COVID and COVID recovery. I'll leave it there, Chair, and happy to take any questions. Emma Jordan, a colleague, is here, who is very much more experienced and has more knowledge around homelessness. If there's any technical questions, I'm sure she'll be happy to help. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tom, for that very succinct summary. And I'll open it up to the floor, please. Councillor Lawrenson and then Petrowski.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry everyone, I know it's late, but you know, it's my job. So yeah, I've got 2 questions. So I'm going to quote from page 15. It talks about grant funding being reduced. So it's been grant funding to deal with homelessness. It's been reduced from 2.3 million, and we now have just under £500,000. So that's on page 15, that reduction. And on page 2, it says one of the key prohibiting factors to being unable to prevent homelessness is the availability and accessibility of suitable, affordable housing solutions. So the question is, how are we as a council expected to prevent homelessness if our funding has been cut by so much? And a more positive question, and I've got another one after this, but I'll do these ones first. Are there other sources of funding that we as a council can apply for to reduce homelessness and help people get back on their feet?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the reduction in funding is a significant issue and concern. The comparison is probably somewhat skewed by the significant additional amount of funding that we received during 21-22 as a result of COVID, where funding around homelessness was relatively plentiful, and certainly more than it was in previous years. And perhaps what might be useful is to provide some comparative of funding for years prior to COVID, which may draw a better comparison. But nonetheless, the pressures around homelessness are significant and are challenging when considering the funding available to us. We do look for all available funding opportunities to maximise the income and the available funding that we have available to respond to homelessness. So a lot of that is around government grants, around individual schemes. Generally speaking, they're restricted by specific grant conditions, so we can't necessarily dictate what we're going to use those for. but we know what the pressures are and where the demand lies and where the most useful allocation of funding and resources lies. So when we have opportunities to apply for funding, we're prepared and ready to respond to those with an evidence base to stand the best chance of securing that funding allocation. In terms of how we deal with homelessness, with those pressures, with experience, with trying to be as innovative as possible, to be as efficient as possible in our responses, and certainly within Worcester particularly, it's working very closely with partners and trying to maximise a partnership approach to responding to homelessness.
Supplementary?
No. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom. Comment and a question. Comment based on the answer you've just given. It seems that because of funding cuts, central government is forcing councils to fund itself in an entirely different way to what it did 10, 15 years ago, whereby it had a central government grant, but because that's been taken away, we're having to scramble around for pots of money. And in the meantime, people suffer because they're on waiting lists. That's partly a political point made. And the question, bit of a preamble. The council was recently judged by the Housing Ombudsman to have failed in its duties to respond appropriately to a complaint regarding private housing. I was in the local paper a couple of weeks ago. Does the council have adequate resources to deal with complaints about housing and ensure that private housing providers are looking after their stock and, more importantly, their residents? Is this a resource issue for the council? Can we deal with complaints and can we compel private housing providers to do their job?
Yes, thanks. So it's just in relation to, is this like homelessness and rough sleeping, or is it a more general point, Neil?
Fair point, Chair. I mean, I'm veering off into a housing-related issue, but I still feel, you know, because it mentions private housing in this 17-page report, it's a legitimate question. It's about resources within this council. Yes, I appreciate homelessness and the housing in general.
Sure. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, resources for local authorities are always pressured, and we could always do with more capacity and more resource to improve the response to services. I'm satisfied that we do have a sufficient available response to complaints around private sector housing, investigating complaints surrounding private sector housing property standards, as well as improving the wider sector. You know, I'd like to have the assurance that if there are concerns within the community around property standards in the private rented sector, they should be reported to us and we will respond accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, that's our mission. That's our mission as a group this year, and last year has been about that raising the standards in the private housing sector and holding those landlords accountable as well. So completely know where you're coming from and appreciate your sentiments on this. Well, yeah, I mean, we're trying to do the best job we can, I believe, under this current circumstances, and we're being squeezed and squeezed. There's no two ways about it, and it's a vicious cycle for us. Unfortunately, we do so well that we've gained a bit of a reputation for being such a good, benevolent, kind city. Then obviously that vicious circle then obviously means that more and more people use our services, yet the funding isn't there. So you know, what do? We can't stop simply helping people. We're going to have to find other ways around it. Councillor Lawrence?
Thank you, Chair. In answer to Neil's query, just on Monday, Jill and I, we're Chair and Vice Chair of Standards, and we will be addressing the Ombudsman thing. We were advised by Sian, but obviously that's not come to us a package of work. She just advised us that Ombudsman cases will be coming through Standards. So there is an oversight committee, just be reassured, as well as active committees on the actual subject.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lawrence. And it's really important that actually we learned those lessons and that you, as a committee, scrutinise where we could have done better. You know, that's the highest that the the general public expect the high standards from us, and you know where we failed, we need to hold up our hands and say this is where we did wrong and this is where we're going to improve. Thank you. Are there any other points, Councillor Petrowski?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for keeping us engaged. I blame Police and Crime Commissioner and his mellifluous and long-winded style for the fact that we are still here. Thanks for persevering, Tom and Emma. Quick question, and a bit of a secret as well. I had lots of questions, but Tom did manage to answer lots of them on email. The spectacle of a committee meeting suffers maybe a little bit, but I think it's much more efficient and quicker. 2.4 in your report, just a very, very quick one. Would you consider, just to get your thoughts and perhaps Lloyd's thoughts as well, you talk about the local steering group, which will be in charge of significant funds actually, doing something slightly different here in comparison to other districts. Would you consider having a critical eye of an elected member as part of that steering group? And also you mentioned the innovation aspect. I'm just thinking about this share framework. Would that help to get the sort of innovation bit perhaps introduced? That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I would like clarification on this innovation bit as well, please.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely, Chair. Yeah, firstly on the local steering group to help drive forward the city action plan. I'm not necessarily opposed to member involvement within the group. We still need to determine the terms of reference, so it's not yet been established, and that's something that we can consider through that group and liaison with chair and vice chair of the committee. The share framework, I mean, is a useful for members that aren't familiar with it. Is a framework of combining a range of data streams and into help informing how we should best respond to homelessness. So it's a model that's still under development, that's been developed through the Centre for Homelessness Impact. And it's something which we're aware of and we're following and keeping abreast of, and have made reference to it within our Worcester City Action Plan, which accompanies the homelessness strategy. So it is an area that we're keen to sort of continue to focus on and develop. A number of the data sets that feed into the share framework are data sets that we provide to DLUHC through our ordinary reporting, but there are also other areas which we do capture the data for, but don't necessarily currently cross-reference those to determine how best we can respond and plan and prepare to resolving homelessness within the city.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other speakers on the item? No. Well, I mean, can we move to the recommendations then, please? And obviously note on record the great amount of work that has been done by officers in regarding homelessness, and also acknowledging all the stakeholders that actually are part of it. We've taken feedback and met with several of them to understand the real issues and how we can kind of, well, advance our services as a result of it. So I'll take the recommendations 1 to 1.3 on block, that the committee notes this report and endorses the proposed allocation of resources. All those in favour? That's agreed. That's unanimous. Thank you. And agenda item number 5, Q4 annual performance report.
Chair, Chair, I'll take this report as read, and if there are any red KPIs within the report, then there's narrative explaining why that is, and hopefully that gives members reassurance that we're aware of it and what we are doing to try and rectify it.
Thank you. I'll open it to the floor. Silence. No. I just want to raise one in terms of percentage of HMOs licensed. Obviously, the citywide HMO that now includes the Gorse Hill and Warndon areas. Well, how is that getting along, and when do we see the implementation date for that?
So the order has been laid this week, Chair. I had an email from Ismania, our private sector housing manager, and it comes into force on the 6th of September.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
Yeah, on page 64, we've got the percentage of homelessness preventions, which in 2021 Q1 was 66.67%. It's been gradually going down to 41.9%, and our target is 30%, right? And therefore we give it a green tick in that. Am I interpreting this correct? That basically we've seen over that period a gradual degradation in terms of the percentage of successful homeless prevention, but we're still saying we're doing well and we're giving ourselves a tick for it.
Any takers?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd probably have to double check the target, because I think looking back to prior to 22-23, there doesn't appear to be a target listed against that. I mean, I think just by way of explanation, I mean, it's not a good picture for us in terms of the percentage of prevention that we've been able to undertake. But it's largely driven by the increase in demand and shortage in supply that we're seeing, so it's in line with that. So as a result of people presenting to us as homeless, we're unable to prevent the homelessness before it reaches the next stage, which is the relief stage of their homelessness application, because we're unable to get people into accommodation within that initial 56-day period. So yeah, I'd need to double check where the target came from and how that was set.
Councillor Pszczowski.
With resignation in his voice, thank you very much. Technical point. There's a few measures there which relate to the homelessness. I'm just a thought, and it's not for tonight, but I'm thinking in terms of those of us who like to do our homework, introducing something like share framework behind those fairly sort of, 93 cases of preventing homelessness. What does it mean? I think it would be really helpful for everybody concerned. As I said, for those who read stuff thoroughly and have time and patience for that. Just a quick comment, if you could consider it, please, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one final one I'm going to raise. I won't keep you too long. Obviously, tennis in parks obviously continues to be a worry. It was a red. I mean, appreciate it's been winter, but the situation really hasn't improved. I walked past the other day whilst going to the cricket and saw people had sneaked in and were playing football over the tennis. So is it called kick volleyball? Kick volleyball. So it's being used for anything but tennis. All right. And there have been calls by certain councillors to repurpose and reuse those. So at what point do we seriously consider looking at that tennis provision and why it's failing to deliver?
Chair, can I suggest that we agenda that for a chair and vice chair briefing meeting, and then it's up to chair and vice chair whether or not they want to bring that back to this committee as an item. But we've probably got some work to do with Freedom Leisure first to understand usage and what the blockers are possibly.
No problem, thank you. So that's report is for noting, so we all happy to note that. Agreed. There isn't any other business, so thank you for your patience and thank you for